Michael, are you humming?
Not me.
Uh-oh, who's humming?
There's
That
another
was me.
time.
That was me. Just.
Yeah, who's the other time?
Like Jeopardy, ding, 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 ding. Waiting for the answers to come.
Mayor, I'm going to say this really quickly, but I couldn't wait to tell you that I was mowing our very small strip of grass yesterday, and I got attacked by bees and stung 6 times. So I got stung 6 times. But I'm not. They hurt a lot, but I'm not allergic, so I was fine. I just have welts, but I felt really sorry for you. If I had been allergic, I would have been in big trouble. So I feel your pain.
They just were vicious. I got stung 4 times.
You guys have killer bees over there?
Yeah,
we must.
Well, they hatch. My husband was researching. They hatch the first week of June, so they lay their nest.
You don't have those murder wasps or whatever they call them out on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Well, I think I made a mother bee very angry because I was probably close to her ground nest, which I get that. I totally get that. That's why I have a very small patch of grass rather than a lawn. So anyway. I need to hire somebody to mow my grass, apparently.
Oh, who's not allergic?
You better put a disclaimer out.
Yeah.
Now we have 2 ties. This is weird.
Yeah, I don't know who got my link, but that ain't me.
All right, we're almost ready, guys. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 28th meeting of the Chapel Hill Town Council. We're pleased that you have joined us. We have a couple of changes to the agenda this evening. First, item number 2 relating to the Stormwater Utility Board review of development projects has been pulled and will come back for further council discussion in September. This item is in response to a petition from the Stormwater Board, but I also want to note that Mayor Pro Tem Parker and council members Ryan Stegman, Wynn, and Gu recently brought forward a separate petition relating to stormwater regulations. We're going to look forward to hearing more about this topic as it relates to all the petitions about stormwater in September. So we will bring that information back to you. Second, item number 4, which is the second reading of the ARA conditional zoning application, has been moved up and Revive has been moved down. So we're flipping the order on the agenda this evening. And there are 4 items up for consideration this evening. 1 is the second reading of the ARA application. 2 is Chapel Hill's Revive Economic Recovery Plan. We also are going to consider changing our ordinance about trash and noise and refuse from criminal to civil charges, and the special use permit evidentiary hearing for redevelopment of U Place Mall. For those of you joining us by Zoom, public input is important to us. If you wish to speak about an item on the agenda after the presentation and council clarifying questions have been completed, Mayor Pro Tem Parker can call you up 2 at a time, and our Amy Harvey will help move you over. You can, if you didn't pre-register, you can still raise your hand on the Zoom function there, or *9 on your phone. So we want to hear from you. We do have a couple of exceptions for tonight. Since the public hearing has been closed and initial vote has been taken, the time for public comment on the ARA project has ended. And also, prior to item number 6, you will need to be sworn in by Sabrina Oliver before providing evidentiary information. So we have that there. Okay, I have a few announcements. The Reimagining Community Safety Task Force presented a report last week of the work over the last 9 months, including a list of recommendations and action items. Our staff will be using this report to bring back a work plan to council and the public next fall. In appreciation of their amazing work, we will be issuing a mayor's salute that we shared with the task force on Wednesday, when they'll be meeting with staff and council liaisons to debrief about the project. So we'll have that out there. 4th of July. Just as a reminder, we're going to be having a smaller event down at the Southern Village Community Park, the Southern Community Park near Southern Village. And it'll be our second large gathering event since the pandemic began, and we're working hard to celebrate safely. And we encourage everyone to keep an eye on social media channels for updates on the weather and availability of parking, and to carpool when you can. And the best viewing place will be from the athletic field. So plan to bring a blanket and or chairs. Summer break. Whew. Tonight's the final meeting of the town council before we take our summer break. And I want to thank the council, the public, the staff, everyone who's worked so hard. It's been a year like no other. I mean, we thought 2020 was a year like no other, but 2021 is shaping up the same way. We had to add 3 additional meetings this month just to get through our packet agendas. And we appreciate all our advisory boards who've worked so hard to look closely at the items we've been considering. And even though the council will not be meeting, the town will still be functioning. There will still be activities going on. But we know that some advisory boards will meet virtually over the summer, and the council will come back together late August for a small retreat. And then our first council meeting back, hopefully in person, will be September 1st. So it has been a long road, and I'm proud of all of you for your willingness. I will say we are going to have a meeting this summer to determine how we don't end up in this kind of situation again, where we have too much to get through. We've got to do something to help us all. So in keeping with our virtual rules for, the meetings for virtual rules, we need a roll call vote from council, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye, here.
Yeah. Councilmember Jess Anderson.
Here.
Thank you. Good. Councilmember Alan Boyncey.
Here.
Councilmember Hong Bin Gu.
Here.
Councilmember Tai Nguyen.
Here.
Councilmember Amy Ryan.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Stegman.
Here.
Okay, great. All right. This is the time on our agenda for public comment and petitions from both the public and the council. If you have something to share with us that's not on the printed agenda, we welcome you to share. First, we'll ask from the public, and then we'll come back to council.
Mr. Scott Harrison has registered to speak.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, well, this may not take long. I guess this is the first I've heard that public comment is not to be permitted on the Aura development. So I guess that's the first I've heard it. And I would petition for a different kind of opportunity for expression, but I respect the council.
Is that what you want to share with us?
Well, I would like to make a comment about the Aura development, but
I'm sorry, we already had 2 public hearings, and all the advisory boards had open comment period for the project, and we are actually in a second reading phase, so I'm sorry.
okay, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Harrison was the only one who indicated he wished to speak at this time.
I do think we had a petition forwarded to us from a member of the public. Am I not correct? Okay, I'm sorry. All right. I know there was a petition for one of our own council members, Ms. Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome. I just wanted to say on behalf of myself, Mayor Heminger, and Councilmembers Stegman and Gu, we'd like to present the following petition concerning the town's stormwater storage basin projects. Concerns have been raised by the council at our May 5th meeting and community members about the deforestation and disruption of bottomland ecosystems that accompany the construction of large stormwater basins. We would therefore like to petition the manager to delay issuing RFQs for the design and construction of the new flood storage basins on the Lower Booker Creek and Eastwood Lake System project list until the town can reevaluate project goals and explore alternatives that will preserve the functioning natural hydrological systems and protect our mature bottomland forests and habitat. We would also like to petition staff to revise the goals and criteria for future watershed studies and improvement planning to include preservation of forests, habitat, and natural hydrology as issues we will consider when determining project approach and design. Thank you.
All right. Is there a motion to receive and refer?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Parker, second by Mr. Boyensee to receive and refer to the mayor and manager. And again, we're going to bring all of these items back. Roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Boyensee,
Aye.
Ms. Gu,
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan,
Aye.
Ms. Stegman,
Aye.
and the mayor says aye as well. Thank you. Are there any other announcements from council members? Ms. Gu?
Yes. Well, I would like to share that also this weekend on July the 3rd, there is a planting milkweeds for monarch butterfly event at our town's Legion Road property. It is an event that's initiated by the East Chapel Hill High School Monarch Butterfly Club. So it is initiated by a group of students and is supported by Light Up and the CAFA NC and the town of Chapel Hill. So we're very excited that to be able to plant some milkweeds in Chapel Hill, and hopefully that we can attract the butterflies and other pollination bees to our town. And this is part of the petition of Monarch Butterfly Alliance that our mayor has signed up to earlier in the year. So we are very excited that to make that happen. So for the people who are interested, for the gardeners who want to make that happen, you are welcome to join the students and a group of gardeners that are working together to beautify our town.
Great. Thank you for sharing. That's great. Wow. Good. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Next would normally be our consent agenda, but since the one item that was on there was pulled, we don't need to approve on the consent agenda. So that will bring us up to the ARA project rezoning. And I want to remind council, this is a second reading. We will hear a short presentation and then only questions that haven't been asked before. And then the applicant can share anything else that they have decided to add to the stipulations from their end. And then we will come back for deliberation and vote. So Ms. Johnson, will you help us forward, please?
Good evening. I'm Judy Johnson, and I have, as the mayor said, a very brief presentation on this project. So this is a second reading. Our recommendation is to consider enactment of revised ordinance 1. And also, as the mayor referenced, we have gone through a public process on this. It has gone to our advisory boards. We've had a couple of public hearings, and then the previous council meeting for the first reading, and then tonight for the second reading. If the council does enact the ordinance after tonight, we would go through a fairly lengthy and technical phase we call final plans. This would be our technical professional staff would be reviewing the application to ensure compliance with the ordinance. Briefly, and I'm not going to spend much time on this, it's about 16 acres. We're at the corner of Martin Luther King and Estes Drive. It's the northeast corner. Quick little aerial of showing you where it is. And the reason we wanted to do a brief presentation is there is a revised added stipulation that we're proposing, and this has to do with details about enhanced tree plantings. This is looking at possibly using silvacells and different sorts of other techniques to help enhance and help ensure that the trees along the frontages of the project would thrive. So we're hoping to add this condition to the ordinance. Plans would be reviewed by our town landscape reviewer and the town arborist. And we would be looking that these devices would be installed prior to the zoning final inspection. And that is all I have for this evening. Happy to answer any questions. And I know the applicant is here as well.
Okay, is applicant presenting anything this evening?
Mayor Heminger and Council, Dan Jewell, CJTPA. No presentation. I'd just like to say we are in agreement with all of the stipulations, including the additional one that Ms. Johnson described a second ago.
Thank you. Council, clarifying questions that have not been asked before. Okay, I bring this back for council comments, then again, things that haven't been shared before. And then I'll ask for any kind of motion. I will explain the process a little bit because I know it's been a bit confusing. So according to our ordinances, a first reading needed a supermajority to pass. That would have been 6 in our case in order to pass. But when you come back for a second reading, it only needs 5 to pass. And I'm trying to think what else I was going to share with you. The rules change on June 30th. The state legislature has changed that we would no longer need a supermajority in order to pass on a first reading. So that ruling will change, just to make everyone aware of that. So I put that out there, and I'll share comments at the end after I've seen if anyone else has comments now. Ms. Ryan?
Yeah, just a brief comment to thank the applicant and staff for working to get the tree stipulation in to ensure that those street trees can grow and thrive. I appreciate you both working together on that.
Anything else that hasn't been shared before? Ms. Gu?
So are we past this the stage of asking questions? So we just come next to just for comments?
Yes, the things that haven't been shared already.
Yeah, well, I actually do have a question regarding this stormwater, because I didn't expect that we just moved past that already.
Go ahead and ask and we'll see what we can do.
Okay. Yeah, well, I do have questions regarding the stormwater, because there is this here is on which page? On page 33 in our packet regarding the stormwater, and it mentioned about that the design of the stormwater device is as currently designed, that these measures fully manage the pre-development versus post-development runoff rate for the 1, 2, and 25-year storm, and the runoff volume for the 2-year storm as prescribed by the town rules. And then it also said, by rerunning the calculation, we further find that we are also managing some of the additional runoff volumes for the 15 and 100-year storm events, thus exceeding the town's current standards. So that's my question. Can the applicant explain what does it mean by fully manage, and it also manage, what does it mean? What because the council has been heard in the previous hearings that the facility is able to manage 100-year storm, and it's not going to exceed the peak volume of 100-year storm. So what does this, it seems to say it only, the design of the facility is to manage 1, 2, and 25-year storm, but just by calculation, it seems like it also does not exceed the 100-year storm. So can you explain that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So Hunter Freeman from McAdams, representing the developer and the stormwater side of this project. So what we mean by fully managed is that we are, as stated, reducing the peak flow from the site in the post-development condition to equal to or below pre-development levels at every point of discharge from the site for those storms. So 1 year, 2 year, 25-year, 50-year, and 100-year storms are all managed for peak flow. In addition, the difference in runoff volume for the 2-year storm is managed for water quality purposes. And so the peak flow is above and beyond town ordinances, and the volume is in accordance with town ordinances.
So for the engineering perspective, when you're saying that you're fully managing the 100-year storm, wouldn't you expect that the capacity of your facility actually leave a margin of error? Like when you are fully managing a 25-year storm, you actually need to check 50-year storm, or when you're fully managing a 100-year storm, you need to check 150-year storm or 200-year storm. That's the standards in engineering, because there is always the need for the margin of error, or the redundancy is required in your system. Do you agree with that?
Yes, and to hopefully address that answer, and I'm looking for the calculations right now, but there is what we call freeboard in the system for the 100-year storm, which is meaning there is extra space above the expected water surface during the 100-year storm. Between that level and the inside top of these vaults, there is additional space there. And I'll stress just additionally that we have also, since we published that report, which was, I believe, in December of 2020, through additional discussion with staff and through council, we have added additional green infrastructure measures, which would further add a level of safety and a factor of safety above and beyond what's in that report. And that report will be updated and reviewed by staff at future submittals.
So when you say that the extra green structure, you mean that the 1% green structure that has mentioned in the previous presentation?
Yes.
Okay, so but I think for your calculation, when you say the 100-year storm, I think the extra spaces that are left for the peak flow, it's almost to the top. There is not much space is left. We have reviewed that together, those charts. And I think that it's definitely not to the standards of checking storm. Like when you're fully managing a 100-year storm, you need to have a check storm of 150-year or 200-year storm. You definitely haven't done that. And also when you're making that calculation, you make the assumption of what is the current existing flow. And by assuming the current existing flow on the scenario of that site is an open field, but we know that it is a mischaracterization of what the current situation is. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so the current situation, I mean, it more accurate characterization is a forest floor. And if you go there, anyone go there to pay a visit can see a very thick layer of the forest, falling leaves, trunks, and there are like crushed tree trunks from the previous farm. So you can see that there's huge, very thick, deep accumulation of those absorbent layers on that site. To characterize that site as open field, which is for a golf course or a soccer field, I think it's a mischaracterization. So I think when you say that the post-development runoff is going to be, because your calculation overestimated the current runoff. So when you say the post-development runoff is going to be the same as the current, this actually, I think is not 100% accurate.
Yeah, Hunter, if I could step in for a minute. Ms. Gu, I appreciate all your analysis of this. What I would like to do, though, is state that what we have done, what we've agreed to is a performance standard that we will be held to, that during the zoning compliance permit, your staff will make sure that we are held to. And that's what Mr. Freeman will do when we get to the zoning compliance permit phase. So what we are proposing is a performance standard that will have to be met and proven by your staff, agreed by your staff that we meet at the time we get to the zoning compliance permit. But thank you for those comments.
Thank you. We need to move on. Any other comments from council members? Okay, I'm going to share something. Before the second vote, development decisions like this one are often difficult. There's a lot of technical information to get through, and there's a lot of competing goals and interests to weigh and balance. We appreciate the hard work that everyone, our staff, the public, the applicant, the council has put into these types of decisions. And I'm really proud of how thoughtful every member of this council has been. They've listened, they've asked good questions, they've really worked hard to create a better outcome. And having faced these types of decisions before, I know that emotions can run high, but it's been deeply disturbing to learn that certain members of council have received threatening and hateful emails from the public. That is not okay. It's also been frustrating to see the misinformation provided about both the process and the project in an effort to alarm the public and garner support for a particular position. These types of behaviors don't help us. And they don't get to better decisions. They erode the trust within our community. And I want you to know that no matter how this vote goes tonight, I hope that we can all agree to disagree respectfully and move forward as a community together. Your council has worked very, very hard. They've listened to lots of different input, and they deserve the respect for weighing these decisions and trying to make the best outcome for the town. So that being said, I will call for a motion.
I move revised ordinance 1.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Parker and second by Mr. Nguyen to revised ordinance 1. We will take a roll call vote for a second reading. Mr. Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Boyntzey,
Nay.
Ms. Gu,
Nay.
Mr. Nguyen,
Aye.
Ms. Ryan,
Aye.
Ms. Stegman,
Aye.
and the mayor votes nay. The motion passes 5-3. Thank you very much for participating. Thank you, council members. Thank you, staff, and thank you to the public. I know this has been a journey that we have gone through together. Thank you very much.
And thank you all.
We'll now move to item number 4, item number 3, I think wrong. Consider future funding and the Revive Recovery Plan with dollars from the American Rescue Plan. Welcome, Mr. Bassett.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss funding our Revive Recovery Plan again. We've tried to reflect on the last time we discussed this with you and come closer to what we believe are council expectations in this funding. So the recommendation tonight is to consider funding the Revive Recovery Plan with dollars from the American Rescue Plan. These are the core targets that we're seeking to affect in these funding initiatives, from small businesses all the way down to talent, and with a variety of activities. Going through the grants, business grants of $200,000, with micro grants starting at $1,000, entrepreneur grants at $1,500, small business grants beginning at $2,500. And we will work with our community partners to finalize guidelines for all of these programs as we move forward. Marketing funds of $150,000 to market Chapel Hill for shopping, dining, and entertainment opportunities, to market real estate opportunities in Chapel Hill, space available for retail and office, and to market downtown Chapel Hill in specific. And one of the council members asked a question about how we're going to use these dollars. We met with Clean Design last Wednesday and asked them to work with us on developing a marketing strategy. The primary target is digital ads, but we also have several campaigns that we're looking at. One of the goals in the Revive plan is to market the districts of Chapel Hill. So we're working with Chapel Hill Magazine to each edition over the next year to focus on a different area of town. We will buy the header, and then businesses have the chance to buy smaller ads. And we'll be doing a similar program with WCHL. So that's just one example of some of the things that we're looking to do with these marketing funds. Next are opportunity grants to support ideas around placemaking and also support women and minority businesses. I've spoken with you about the idea with Andrea Rusling of the vendor opportunities on the parking lot behind the Lantern and Bass Night Lane. We've been meeting with our staff and further vetting that. We expect to have a proposal this week on that. And we've also initiated conversations for a temporary structure for farmers market at University Place. This pool of dollars also includes $21,000 for the downtown partnership for them to use in Revive related work. Downtown Together is a planning initiative primarily with the university and the town. The partnership has retained consulting services and will begin moving forward in July. And so half of these funds will fund that strategic management plan for downtown to talk about how we continue to propel activity in our downtown in a positive way. And then the balance, or $50,000 additional dollars, will be used for beautification of East Franklin and Columbia, also matched by UNC. And then 10,000 of these dollars go to the Chapel Hill Downtown Partnership for other related activities related to Revive. Workforce development, we talked to our community partners and felt that we needed to dig deeper in our research. While there has been some previous research, we felt we needed to dig a little deeper and make sure that whatever we spend our targeted dollars on, that they are meeting the needs of our workforce that is unemployed. And so we'll be doing that research work first, and then funding programs associated with the outcomes of that research. Some of the current activities that we have done already related to Revive, we hosted an on-air job fair with WCHL several weeks ago. We are currently organizing a job fair at University Place for July. I mentioned the project with Andrea Rusling, Bass Night Lane, and the Farmers Market. So those are some of the things that we've already been working toward as a part of this recovery plan. And again, to remind council to consider funding the Revive Recovery Plan with dollars from the American Rescue Plan. And I'm glad to answer any questions that I might at this point.
Also, clarifying questions, Mr. Parker, Ms. Gu, then Mr. Nguyen, then Ms. Ryan.
Yeah, Dwight, thank you for that. Appreciate it. We received a letter today from the Downtown Partnership, and I'm not sure if I'm interpreting it correctly, so maybe you can help me. But it seemed like there was an ask in there for more money than we're currently giving them from this. Are they happy with what I guess it's an additional 10,000, and they're asking for money in a future tranche? Or where are we in terms of meeting the financial requests of the partnership?
So there's a total of 31,000 in this ask tonight for the Downtown Partnership, and that does meet their interest. The letter was as much about their future interest in how the MSD is being distributed, and it's a conversation that's been ongoing since they completed their strategic plan. But Matt was very supportive of what we're asking for and felt very comfortable where we're at. We've also been supporting Matt in other ways financially when we can to help achieve some of his goals in his strategic plan. So he feels like between what we're asking for tonight, what we previously granted, and our ongoing partnership, that the Downtown Partnership is fine for this upcoming budget year.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Gu, then Mr. Nguyen, then Ms.
Yeah. So I'm just asking that, can you explain how the community can be involved with this? Like if they have some idea, because you have different grants and all that, they have already been assigned to different organizations or other community groups who would be interested in have some of those projects, or how are they going to apply for those grants?
So the business grants are one area, and they're open to by application once we initiate the guidelines. The opportunity grants tend to be community driven by interest. And I told you the two projects we're working on. And fortunately or unfortunately, those two projects, if we're able to pull both of them off, will probably be the majority of the $90,000 left for opportunity grants to make those two happen.
So you're saying that at this time, if some other community groups would be interested in applying for that grant, there's not funds left to open to the public?
The Opportunity Fund is completely open at this point until we figure out whether those two projects or other projects can work. We're certainly open to listen to any ideas community members have, and if we can't fund it this year, we can certainly come back next year and ask council for additional American Rescue dollars. But since we've already been talking about these two projects in that Opportunity Fund, I think there may be limitations there but we certainly want to be supportive wherever we can. And we feel like both of those are good, impactful projects that could benefit both downtown and the area around University Place.
Yeah, well, I think that's great. But my question is just, for the people who hasn't been in the past being funded or being like coming to our attention, is there something that we can try to bring up those people, especially the people in the marginalized communities who may not be aware of those opportunities in the past, the outreach efforts that we have, trying to reach out to them and say, here is something that we have. If you have some good idea, or if you have some project that you just waiting to launch, but just does not have the fund, and here's opportunities that you can apply for. Is there something that we can share with the community?
So when we get the grant guidelines together, which will be sometime over the summer, we're glad to share them with council. The small business grants begin at $2,500 and go up from there. And so there certainly is opportunity for ideas to be funded in a beginning phase this year, and then mature in a future budget phase and be fully funded in other ways. So I absolutely say we're completely open. We've talked about bringing back together our community partners who have put this plan together to have them kind of vet the guidelines. And then also we'll have other organizations like the Minority Business Council, and we'll be marketing all the work that we're doing through the town, the Downtown Partnership, and the Chamber of Commerce and other community partners. So there's tremendous number of opportunities in all of that for community involvement and participation.
We'll also be having council meetings in the fall to talk about additional ARPA funding, because this is just a small piece that needed to get enacted before we come back together in September. And we're going to be asking community for input on ideas of things we should do.
Yep. Thanks.
Mr. Nguyen and Ms. Ryan?
I had a quick question for the town attorney. If we were to include a stipulation in the business grants and or the opportunity grants that a certain percentage of the grants had to go to women or minority owned businesses, is that permissible?
I'd have to look into it on this particular type of grant, Councilmember Nguyen. Sorry, I can't answer that one right now.
Gotcha. Thank you.
But I'm happy to come back on that.
Ms. Ryan?
Yeah, and just as kind of a follow-up to that, Dwight, the material you sent just talks about women and minority businesses centered on those opportunity grants. And I just wanted to know, was that deliberate, or should they be also included in the universe of the other grant recipients?
We're going to make sure we include them in all, but we just saw some opportunity, like with the UNDRIP and Bass Knight Lane proposal. Those 4 slots would be specifically for women and minority businesses only, as a way to outreach to them. And I think that, there's also some opportunity, if we participate with the farmers market, to see that same kind of result, with women and minority owned businesses. But as a part of the Revive plan, our overall target is to try to make sure, even our advisory board was 30% minority, 30% female. And so we certainly want to make sure that we're reaching those segments and doing our fair share to make them aware of the opportunities for promoting their ideas.
Right. It might be useful to include more of that language throughout your materials, so folks don't feel like maybe they wouldn't be entitled to it or they won't be considered. I think to just make it clear that you're that open to that, I think that would be great. And I would, if Mr. Nguyen's idea is legal, if the attorney finds that okay, I would support setting targets. I think that makes sense.
Any other council members with clarifying questions? We do have a few members of the public wishing to speak on this item, so we invite you to come forward. If you didn't pre-register, you're welcome to raise your hand. I know we had at least one pre-register for this. Mr. Parker will call you in, and we ask you to keep your comments to within a 3-minute limit, please. Thank you.
Ms. Herman Fushi signed up in advance. I don't see him logged in, but maybe Amy knows. And then we have Michelle Laws has raised her hand wishing to speak as well. I don't know if Mr. Fouché is here.
Why don't you move over Ms. Laws and then we'll see if he arrives.
And I do not see Mr. Fouché as well.
Welcome, Ms. Laws. How are
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, members of the Town Council. Two quick points that I want to make on behalf of the Chapel Hill Carrboro NAACP's Economic Committee. One is in reference to the language in the resolution approving the funding for the Revive Recovery Plan. They're in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The fifth, whereas there is opportunity to embrace women and minority-owned businesses in our community. The term embrace, or the word embrace, we'd like to recommend that you strengthen that just a little bit. Embrace could be, hi, we're so glad you're in business, versus, hi, we're here to support and invest. So we would like to recommend that that language before the resolution is approved is changed to invest in women and minority-owned businesses. We think that adds a little bit more teeth to that, and it speaks to the spirit of the document. I want to thank you. I'm quite impressed with where we are, but another issue that has come up is being very clear on those that were already behind prior to or pre-COVID. So not approaching this from an equal lens, but an equity lens. And having said that, we do think that it's important and necessary that you specifically target many of these dollars to BIPOCs or Black and people of color. Specifically in Chapel Hill, we're interested in Black-owned businesses. A lot of work was done during the Juneteenth holiday, and we thank you all who supported that. There is a list of Black-owned businesses that could certainly benefit from having supports in terms of marketing. And so that $150,000 that you have earmarked or allocated for marketing, we like for you to consider not the existing restaurants and so forth that you know had a cushion or have certainly ended up in a better place, that you consider a large proportion, significant proportion of those dollars to go and towards Black-owned businesses in Chapel Hill. Mr. Fouché had some other items that he was going to address, but those are our two main concerns. And then in terms of the workforce and getting people employed and back in the labor market, please, 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 we know there's a lot of focus on college graduates, and it's indicated throughout the document, but we also ask that you consider those who have not gone to universities, but who are natives in particular, and who are working in service and low-wage industries, and supporting them as well, as they are backbone to our industry, our community and economy as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak?
Does not appear to be. You're on mute, Mayor.
We bring it back to you.
You're on mute again.
I was looking for Mr. Fouché, sorry. All right. Council members, comments, Mr. Nguyen.
Am I allowed to propose some amendments?
You are.
So I would like to propose, barring the town attorney research and approval, that we include specific targets for the opportunity and business grants for minority and women-owned businesses.
Okay, you want to also propose changing the language to be invest versus
yes,
embrace?
that would also be great.
And just a suggestion, we can, to the target suggestion, we can add to the extent permitted by law, and that will solve that issue. But that won't excuse me from researching it. I don't mean to suggest that, but we can add that, and that will clean that up for now.
Can I see a thumbs up if council's amenable to this amendment?
Do we have a specific target?
I would like somewhere between, well, for the business grants, 20 and 30%. I think the opportunity is one that should be larger, given the focus of that grants.
Mr. Bassett, do you have a recommendation? I know that we talk a lot about this at launch and some other places about how we recruit and how we try to really focus on women and minorities, and launch has actually done a really good job, but
So I think 20% is incredibly reasonable, and I think that we can achieve that. Some categories. I apologize. It's going to be easier on some categories of the grants than others. I think the micro grants and the entrepreneur grants are going to be easier. As far as established business grants, we certainly are going to make sure we touch everyone that's in existence in our corporate limits that's eligible. But you know, we'll do our best, but I still think the 20% is very reasonable across the board. And we can certainly shoot toward 50% of the opportunity grant toward women and minority. I mean, because that is the intent. That's what we've talked about. And I have to tell you, if you've read the revised plan, inclusion and equity and equality are core components of that overall plan. And so it is the intent, whether it's seen by council already or not, that we make sure we're addressing those ideas in our community. They're critically important.
okay.
I think 20%, 50% sound good. And I appreciate the intent, but I think the BIPOC community has seen intentions for a long time, and we'd like some guarantees if possible. So want to propose that amendment. Thank you for y'all's support.
Okay. Ms. Gu?
I actually am not sure that why we restrict that to 20 to 30%, because I think for this grant, I really think that we need to, because it's a American Rescue Fund, so I think it really should go to the ones that who need that the most. If the minority and the women businesses are the ones that are the most suffering, then we should definitely contribute or dedicate most of the fundings to them. I'm not sure that with this why we have to set that to 20 to 30%.
Well, I don't think they're restricted. It's just targets, minimum targets to shoot for.
We could use the word to exceed 20 and 50%. We could use that.
Yeah, the floor is not ceilings.
Yeah, it's the base. Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other comments? What is council pleasure here?
I move the, what is it, resolution?
Amended.
Amended resolution, whatever.
Is there a second to the amended resolution, whatever? I heard Mr. Boyncey, but thank you.
And a long season.
Yeah, it has been. We'll take a roll call vote, and then I will need a vote to excuse Ms. Anderson after this. She's having technical difficulties. So we'll do this one first, and I'll ask you for that one.
You have not entered any numbers. Please re-enter your meeting ID.
Mr. Jones is reestablishing phone connection. There we go. Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Bye.
Ms. Anderson. Mr. Boyncey.
Aye.
Ms. Gu.
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
Ms. Stegman.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. I need a motion to excuse Ms. Anderson.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Ryan, second by Mr. Nguyen. Roll call vote, please. Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Boyncey.
Aye.
Ms. Gu.
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
Ms. Stegman.
Aye.
The mayor says aye as well. Thank you for that. Texting, but we'll see. Okay. Thank you, Dwight and Maurice. I hope I guess your phone's tired of the meeting too. So
Mayor, can you hear me?
we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. For some reason I cannot control my mute on my video. It is.
Maurice, can you hear us? I can control you if you need me to. Do you want me to mute you?
I can hear you, but for some reason my audio keeps going to mute.
Okay.
And I'm not controlling it at this moment. So if I drop out, I apologize.
Okay, well, no
I'll
worries.
keep a close eye on that and I'll try to jump back in as quickly as I can. I don't know what's going on at this point, but I
Well,
apologize.
you're on for presenting the next item. Do you
I
wish to
am,
do it?
I know, yeah.
Okay.
So I'll give it a shot and see how it goes.
Okay.
So Mayor and Council, thank you. We are presenting this evening on an issue to change a couple of our ordinances in an effort to decriminalize some of the town's ordinances. That's an issue that's been raised a number of times in recent years, especially in our discussions over equity. Recently, the staff was asked to propose changes that would remove criminal penalties from our noise and garbage ordinances and replace them with civil penalties. We have before you tonight those proposed changes for your consideration that will achieve several goals. One, to eliminate criminal penalties for noise and trash infractions and replace them with civil fines. Two, to streamline and clarify the civil enforcement of our code. Third, to add penalties to areas of the ordinances that do not currently have penalties. And fourth, to establish a path by which we could address repeat offenders with an escalating fine approach that would begin at $25 per offense and increase up to $500 for repeat violations. Along the way, our staff has also made some clarifying changes in the ordinances and corrected gender-specific sections as well. So let's touch on the proposed ordinances. We'll begin with the noise ordinance at section 1143. Currently, a violation of that section could result in a fine not to exceed $150, possible imprisonment for up to 10 days, or both. Staff is proposing to eliminate the misdemeanor charge and offer a $25 fine for the first violation, $75 for the second violation, $150 for the third violation, and $250 for the fourth and subsequent violations, with a maximum of $500. With the garbage, trash, and refuse ordinances, currently violators may receive a misdemeanor charge that could result in a $500 fine and up to 30 days imprisonment. Staff is proposing to eliminate the criminal charge and replace it with civil penalties that resemble the penalties proposed for the noise ordinance, beginning with a $25 fine and escalating to $250 and upwards of $500 for subsequent violations. So we received some questions from council concerning other ordinances where penalties could be converted from criminal to civil, and staff welcomes your ideas about those sections, and we'll continue to work on those ordinances in the near future and come back to council at some point in the fall. Our recommendation for council this evening is to enact the proposed changes to the town's noise and garbage, trash, and refuse ordinances to remove criminal penalties and to clarify the civil enforcement remedies for violations of the ordinances. Our town attorney, Ian Anderson, and I will now take any questions that you may have.
I'm going to just jump in for a minute. We've been working on this for a long time. We learned about this process at the Metro Mayors when Wilmington did it to help with some noise situations. Hillsborough has already passed similar, but this is just a first step. We needed to create a process in order to write the tickets, collect the fines, enforce that way. We know there's other pieces to this that we want to add. We want to start decriminalizing quite a number of our ordinances. This is a first step and creates the pathway for doing so. So this is not, it's not all encompassing, and it's we've got other ones to do, but the staff's worked really hard to find a pathway forward that we can use now to move other criminal penalties for things that shouldn't be criminalized in response to equity and policing and all those types of things. And plus they've shown that this noise ordinance situation with civil fines is actually a lot more effective and at getting people to curb that behavior. So Ms. Anderson, did you have anything else to share?
Just here for questions.
Okay.
I did want to clarify that civil penalties have long existed in the ordinance along with the criminal, but the intention was to strengthen that and make it more organized and the path clearer. And so that's been another goal of this.
It's also true we can charge the landlord of a building if it's the tenants.
Well, I made a change that said that the person who allows the noise and or the trash issues to continue would also be responsible. So that wasn't in there before, and it just took a tweaking of some language to add that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Clarifying questions. I saw Mr. Bointsey, then Mr. Parker, and Ms. Gu.
Sorry, actually mine is more of a comment, so I'll save mine.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Parker?
Yeah, this is something fairly specific, but we've been hearing, at least I have, a lot of complaints about cars and motorcycles on Franklin and Rosemary and elsewhere making a lot of noise. And so would those kinds of problems be covered under the noise ordinance, or are they considered moving violations for the police? How does something like that fit into this framework?
I'm not actually sure of the answer to that question. I think that might be a better one for law enforcement. I don't think Chief Blue is here tonight. But we can get that answer for you, Mr. Parker. And if additional changes need to be made in other parts of the code to address that, that can be looked at for sure. But for the most part, the noise ordinances relate to noises that originate on, in parcels, so how it intertwines with street noise, I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Gu? You're muted.
Sorry, I'll find that button. Okay. So my question is about the enforcement. So for those kind of violations, is that based on active enforcement or passive enforcement? We are responding to neighbors' complaints or anyone's complaints, then we go to issue the tickets, or our police actually are going to actively, patrolling the sites that usually have student apartments or other sites that have received those complaints, high frequency complaints in the past. That are there? How are we going to do that? Again, that's the questions that you're asking.
Yeah, I think. Sorry. Yeah.
No, I was just it would be a combination of both. We would certainly have our officers. Especially keep an eye on areas in which we've had previous violations, and then we would be responsive to any complaints that we received.
Okay, so
sorry, I would add that nothing that's proposed for a change tonight will affect in the town's ability to do any of that, and it won't limit that ability.
Okay, so when you say it. Because one of the complaints is they're complaining about the student apartments, the complex. So if you say that the landlord who allows that, then the landlord may say, we never allow students to do that. They just did that. We have the rules. They can show you the rules that in their rental agreement, just the students are just doing that. So that seems to me that is that not enough teeth?
Well, I think it could be a question of fact in each particular case. I'm not sure I can give an across the board response to that. It's just maybe case by case enforcement type. I'm not sure if Mr. Jones has anything to add to that, but
I do not. I think you're right about that, Ms. Anderson.
All right. Any more clarifying questions where we have to hear from the public? Okay. If anyone from the public's wishing to speak, you can use the raise your hand function or star 9 on your phone. I don't think we had anyone pre-registered, did we? Mr. Parker?
We did not, and there is no one who has signed up.
Okay.
I mean, no one who's raised a hand, sorry.
Okay. I bring it back to council then for comments. Mr. Boynton, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just want to thank our town attorney, Ann Anderson, want to thank our town manager, Maurice Jones, for really doing a deep dive here into our code of ordinances. In Chapel Hill, we pride ourselves on being a place of inclusivity. And one thing that's been shown by national centers really across the country in talking about the criminalization of poverty is that ordinances like these have historically intended to affect disproportionately poor people. And so I really appreciate our staff going to work. I can remember back in 2018 when Karen, Councilmember Stegman, and I sat down in the former town attorney's office to talk with him about what we could be doing to clean up our ordinances. And remember also having conversations with Chief Blue, and really appreciate how responsive staff has been to what Councilmember Stegman and I raised at that time. So thank you.
Other comments? Ms. Gu?
Yeah, well, I think it's an issue that, again, like many issues that the council is dealing with, it really needs a balance. On one hand, we certainly do not want to criminalize poverty, and we need to make sure that there is no discriminatory behavior in the way that we enforcing the ordinances and the laws. But on the other hand, it has been a chronic issue that has been complained about by our residents. And it's mostly isolated in the student housing area. So I think it has been an issue. I think that we need to differentiate those different patterns and the irresponsible behavior from the students or some others that who are not taking care of what they should do by having the parties in violation of those noise or the trash ordinance. But on the other hand, of course, we do not want to misuse the ordinances and to criminalize poverty. I think both of these things that needs to be addressed, because I have heard the complaints from both sides. I think the way that how we enforce that probably is the key.
I also want to lend my thanks. I've really pinged on our attorney and our manager to get and staff to get this through, and Chief Blue. We had started these conversations, like Mr. Boincy said earlier on. We needed to find a pathway. We've been talking about this at the CCC Coalition about how we start making changes to both decriminalize poverty, but also to have effective results. And in fact, we haven't been giving out, jail. We haven't been criminalizing or giving people writing up those kinds of violations, because no one wants to send somebody, to that if they left their trash out or something. So I think this is going to be effective, especially for the noise ordinance. Some of the situations Ms. Grew described, getting a fine and having to pay over and over, or getting to a point has been proven to be effective in other cities that have gone ahead and enacted this ordinance, and then it's created that pathway for collecting the fines and dealing with all that. So I'm looking forward to more changes the same way, but we will start with this one, and I'm excited for council support on this. So Ms. Anderson?
May I make one more clarifying point, just so council will understand one more thing? So what by decriminalizing, we take a certain aspect of this away from the court system. But I did want to make it clear that in the instances where a series of fines is not effective to alter behavior of a particular egregious offender, should that occur, the ordinance still retains the town's ability to go to court on a civil basis and get injunctive relief or get an order of abatement or something to make them stop. And that, I think, from a policy perspective, proves a lot more effective than criminalizing anyway. So I just wanted to make it clear that that is still an option under this ordinance. And I think we've made it a little clearer that that's an option. I'm sorry. Thank you for letting me say that.
Thank you. All right. How says council?
I move ordinance 2.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Stegman. Any comments that haven't already been shared? Roll call vote. Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Boincy?
Aye.
Ms. Gu?
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen?
Aye.
Ms. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Stegman?
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well, unanimous. Thank you. And thank you for getting it onto this agenda so late. I know that we asked you to put it, I asked you to put it here so we could get it taken care of and move forward and develop that pathway over the summer and come back and look at some more. So thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to item number 6, which is consider an application for special use permit modification for University Place at 201 South Estes Drive. Our clerk, Sabrina Oliver, will need to swear in anyone who's not been sworn in already. And then as we call in public for public comments, they would have to be sworn in as well. So appreciate that. So I will look for Ms. Johnson. There you go. Everyone started moving around. I'm sorry. Thank you.
And good evening. I'm Judy Johnson with our planning department, and I have a fairly brief presentation. I'm going to quickly go over some of the background information that you've seen before, but want to spend a couple minutes on some follow-up from the last public hearing. So as the mayor said, this is the University Place. We are recommending that you consider closing the public hearing this evening and could consider adoption of Resolution 6, which would approve the special use permit modification if the council can make finds that the application meets the 4 findings. So we have had numerous evidentiary hearings on this project. I think this was the continuation, and that would be the 6th hearing this evening. If the council does adopt the ordinance or adopt the resolution, it would move forward to a final plan, our technical review phase. So these are the 4 findings of fact that are associated with a special use permit. And as you know, no special use permit shall be approved by the town council unless each of the 4 findings can be made. Briefly, we've talked about this obviously several times. This is the university, the old University Mall, University Place today. It's about 43 acres. It's at the northwest corner of Fordham and Estes Drive. It's currently zoned community commercial. They are not proposing a zoning change. They are looking at expanding some of the permitted uses on the property. These could include residential uses, office, hotel, and some commercial uses. Obviously, commercial uses, that's what's there today. A couple of the things we wanted to provide you some updates are on these topics since the June 9th meeting. I'm going to quickly go through these. So the developer has agreed to work with the farmers market to accommodate the market and negotiate a lease to have a space for the farmers market to work through. We also heard some conversation about Willow Drive and the frontage along the mall. And so in working with the applicant, they are proposing to maintain the existing 5-foot sidewalk along that frontage. The existing sidewalk would avoid any jeopardizing the existing trees that line Willow Drive. In addition, the applicant is proposing a 4.5-foot bicycle lane along the frontage of the mall. As you're aware that we did have a bit of conversation at the hearing with the members of the Binkley Baptist Church, the adjoining property. We did meet with them. I believe the applicant has met with the church members. And from this, having gone out there and visited with the church group, so this driveway was originally in the traffic impact analysis, was shown to have a right in, right out with a median blocking this. Right now, if I commonly call this the Harris Teeter driveway, that there is a left turn and a right turn out and a one-way in. So after multitude of conversations with the church and with our traffic engineer, we have decided that limiting this access was not reasonable and would have a detrimental impact on the Binkley Baptist Church. So we are proposing that stipulation be modified and that drive would remain as it is today. Believe this is reasonable to continue to have the full access at this intersection. So in light of that, we have a couple of stipulation changes that we would like to propose to the resolution after conversations with the applicant as well as the Binkley Baptist Church and town staff. And these have been actually been developed over the last 24 hours or so. So revising that stipulation 33L to have that site access drive, the Harris Teeter drive, remain as it is. There is also concern about the multi-use path we've heard from the Binkley Baptist Church. So what we have added is that the stipulation was in there already for the multi-use path along the frontage of the Binkley Baptist Church. If you recall, the applicant has agreed to build a multi-use path along their entire frontage of Fordham, including Binkley Baptist. So the Binkley Baptist was a little bit concerned about the impact on their property along that stretch along Fordham of Binkley. And so the developer has agreed, and the stipulation somewhat reads, will ensure that the design of the multi-use path will be done in consultation with the church, and that and removal of any landscape materials on the church's property shall be, to the extent possible, replaced with similar type trees. Certainly they will not be the same caliber as what's there today, but would be in consultation with the church to come into best use for the best replacement. And in addition, in talking with the church and the applicant of University Place, a couple of added stipulations. And this one is to maintain access to Binkley Baptist at all times during construction, and that they will stay in, consult with the church. And I believe as we work through our final plan stage, we'll come up with a schedule for updating from the University Place to give to the church. So that any issues can be discussed beforehand or before they arise to a concern. Just calling out the buffer along the church, Binkley Baptist Church and the University Place property, there is a 10-foot type B buffer that is required by ordinance, and the applicant will be preserving that. We also have added a stipulation for height. And this is, if I had a map, it would be helpful, but we all know where the K&W was, and that boundary with the church, that border there. So the applicant has agreed that heights of structures in that, let's call it the K&W area, shall be a maximum of 34 feet which would be is our primary height at the setbacks for community commercial, but they will maintain that for 100 feet back from the property line. So they won't be able to build, relatively that'd be a 3-story building. So in that first 100 feet from the property line with Binkley Baptist. And then also we want to formalize the cross-access easement. They have a cross-access easement for the drive. I mean, the Harris Teeter driveway coming through there, but formalizing the pedestrian access. They have a couple of pedestrian paths stairs that connect Binkley Baptist to where K&W was. And so just adding that a little bit language there to formalize that pedestrian cross-access through there. Figure this is a good time to pursue that and get that just a recorded document. So that kind of summarizes what we wanted to add to the Binkley regarding the impact of Binkley Baptist. Wanted to just touch a little bit. We talked about most of this at the June 9th meeting. We've been working with the applicant to revise this a little bit, trying to put some quantifiers on there somehow for us to measure these as this works its way through our final plans. And so they're committing to a minimum of 90,000 square feet of impervious that would be green infrastructure type of facilities. No adverse flood impact, and looking at a 4% reduction in the peak flow rates for the 1, 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100-year storm events, and then a 1% reduction in runoff volumes for those same storms. Also looking for some educational signs. These would be for the bio-green infrastructure type of thing. And then looking for an operations and maintenance manual for the green stormwater infrastructure that to help us. These would be recorded as part of the process. Just to touch briefly, we've talked about this before, just to confirm, we are proposing or recommending the 10% at 65% of the AMI for the affordable housing component. And we also did spend quite a bit of time, some of our professional staffs, I mean, Brian Peterson, one, along with a couple other staff, did do a fairly extensive review of the University Place design standards. I'm not going to go into depth. I know Brian is here and happy to discuss further, but and I know this, we did write up in our staff report to you of the findings that were made, but just wanted to touch on a couple of differences. I think one of the questions was, what is the difference between Blue Hill and University Place? And so just wanted to quickly go through these. These are the key differences that we identified. Outdoor amenity spaces and recreation spaces. So Blue Hill, you would have both. And in University Place, they are recommending only the outdoor amenity space. And massing, that there's different ways in Blue Hill versus the design standards of how massing is being identified. Then tree planting zones, I think fairly familiar about how the Blue Hill has this different street frontages based on the different type of road there. The University Place standards require tree planting zone behind sidewalks, slightly different. Stormwater in the Blue Hill that we have, if you recall, we passed some text amendments to incentivize the stormwater impervious surface water quality treatment done in the Blue Hill. University Place design guidelines do not address stormwater, so that's why that is being handled outside of the design standards. And then offsite lighting, so the University Place is falling to meet our standards of our land use management ordinance, which is 0.3 foot candles at the property line. Blue Hill allows a higher offsite light spillage at the property line. So that, I believe, summarizes what we have heard or heard at the June 9th meeting. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions. And we do have stormwater staff and traffic, Kumar Nepali is here, as well as Brian Peterson is here to help answer any questions.
Thank you. Is the applicant going to make a presentation or just say that they do agree with all the stipulations that our staff has proposed?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Leanne Brown and I represent the applicant. We are available to answer any questions you have tonight. In addition, once you have gone through the process of determining whether there's any additional evidence to be presented by the public and therefore evidence that we might need to respond to, I'd like to make a brief closing wrap up of the presentations that have been made to you to date and where we are. And so we are open for questions, and I'd like to reserve that opportunity after you determine whether there's anyone else to hear from.
Could you verify for us that you're in agreement with the stipulations that our staff?
Yes, ma'am. We are, and I plan to talk about that in my closing remarks.
Thank you.
We're good, and we'll go through that in some detail in a few minutes.
All right. Council, clarifying questions. Mr. Parker, followed by Ms. Ryan, then Ms. Stegman.
Yeah, just two questions. One is, I guess, regards traffic vis-a-vis the Binkley Church. So I understand the changes that are being made. And I'm glad that we're trying to help, the church. I just wanted to understand from in Mr. Nepali's professional opinion as a traffic engineer, whether that will adversely impact traffic flows, or he is satisfied that traffic will be appropriately dealt with without, without the original proposed changes.
Good evening, ma'am. This is Kumar Nepali, traffic engineer. We investigated this further. Traffic impact analysis prepared by the town consultant indicated that existing conditions and future build conditions with University Place Mall development indicated level of service E to F for the Willow Drive approach going out to Fordham Boulevard. Unfortunately, there is not enough existing right-of-way in the street that can allow us to build another left turn lane. We are looking into other opportunities. We can look into changing the signal phasing, and we also can look into changing the pavement markings. Right now we have a through lane, straight through lane, and also we have a left turn lane going out from Willow Drive. Maybe we'll be looking changing that through lane to a left turn and through lane. And we also looking, we also connected actually using the townwide model, traffic model, changing the signal timing patterns at this intersection, and also along complete Fordham Boulevard from Estes Drive all the way to FC Church Road, which helped us in the future build conditions, which brings the level of service in the PM peak hour to D to E. So we are looking other options as the left turn lane, another dual left turn lane is not feasible within the existing street right of way. We also came to know that during the process, there is a cross access to the church from the driveway from the University Mall, from the Harris Theater area, which we cannot negatively impact the driveway, and they use the driveway as a full access most of the times because the traffic backs up on Willow Drive for their first driveway. So they cannot make those left turns, and we cannot detrimentally impact this driveway access. Taking all that into consideration and traffic and talking to the TIA consultant and looking at the townwide traffic model results, I think there are other options the town and NCDOT can work because it is an existing problem. I know it will get worsen, and we are recommending a stipulation to collect some payment in lieu for the signal timing by this university place, the applicant. I think that will help us to do more things at that intersection in future before the development takes place.
Okay, thank you. And my next question is directed to Mr. Peterson. And again, Mr. Peterson, in your, professional judgment as a urban designer or architect, are you comfortable, recognizing also that the design guidelines are not a final product, but that it will be further reviewed and dealt with over the summer at the least? But given the differences between the design guidelines here and the Blue Hill design guidelines, and the fact that more work will be done, in your professional opinion, are you comfortable that the design guidelines at the very least provide a good jumping off point for coming up with a satisfactory solution?
Yes, I think that I agree with you said that what you said, that we have worked over the past few weeks to suggest some changes, and I think it will be part of an ongoing process to further refine them as we go along.
But you're comfortable with where we are today?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay, Ms. Ryan followed, sorry, I forgot who Ms. Stegman.
Let's see. Question number 1 for staff. Are the design guidelines equivalent to ordinance, or are they suggestions?
They would be, they're beyond suggestions. I'm trying to think of the right word. Sorry.
So, well, I mean, I understand that they're guidelines, but are they requirements that the applicant has to meet? For instance, if they say we're going to, part of the guidelines describe the Willow Street frontage, right, and lays out dimensions. Are those dimensions they'd be required to meet, or are
Yes.
those just, okay. So can you talk a little bit more about where they wouldn't be required to adhere to the guidelines?
So I didn't have a good answer for it. Be looking at them as standards through the process. So if they say, like the street, they do have some street cross-section type of things there, they would have to meet that. I'm trying to think where they would not, or where it would be. I think I misspoke. I think it is, they do have some step back, they have some massing things. They would not be able to, they could go further, right? But not get more restraint or less.
Okay. And I don't know if the town attorney has any thing to weigh in on with this one?
No, I think that I agree with what Ms. Johnson said about them being standards that they can exceed, but only in the most extreme cases not meet. And I think that they would have to, come up with a compelling reason not to meet them. So I would see them as standards that they have agreed to meet.
Yeah.
And Ms. Nice Brown may have a different take on that, but that's how I see it.
Okay.
I can't really call them have the effect of an ordinance, but that's, maybe too technical.
Right. Well, I mean, again, we have a very similar code in the Blue Hill District, and that actually is ordinance, correct? So this is what's being proposed here as sort of it's just an unusual critter that we.
As I understand it, it's what they've agreed to as more or less a condition of the SUP. And, I will readily grant that Judy Johnson knows the packet better than I do.
Okay, and I just at that point, I would be concerned about how any variances would be handled. I mean, normally we do that kind of thing as minor or major modifications that either come back to council. And Judy, you don't have to respond right now, but
Yeah, I will find.
If you can find whether we have that, but I think that we need to make sure that there's some process for doing that as well. So anyway, I'll move on. So the tree canopy requirements for a multifamily, the tree canopy is done by use, right? Not by zoning district requirements. So the tree canopy requirements for multifamily are 30%, but mixed use is 40. Why have you picked 30 for this site?
I believe we picked 30 because it is also using that term. I mean, you raise a good point. It could be either both, could be residential, could be commercial. Mixed use has a different rate. We've settled on the 30%.
Okay. Okay. New question. So the applicant is pledged to preserve existing trees where possible. Is that any way enforceable by the town? Does that have any kind of legal meaning?
No, and I would be looking to our landscape reviewer and our arborist for best practice on that. There are cases we know where preservation of the existing trees may not be in the best health of the tree, like if we're doing work there, that it may be better to replace the tree. I know we're trying to preserve the trees along the frontages of certainly willow and Estes. Estes, there will be some trees that come down with some modification of the driveway locations. So we will be losing some of those trees and working to preserve as many of those as we can, but not wanting to get too close to that driveway entrance.
Yeah, so I think that's, I would really love to see a stronger standard there with, at a minimum, review by the arborist. But I think that, for instance, instead of saying, well, we think it's best to put this structure here or this fixture here, and it's going to mean losing a tree, but we'll replant one, that's fine. I really come from kind of another point of view that says, look, we've got a mature tree that's been in there for a while. Let's try to redesign. So if you can think about what sort of a stipulation we could craft around that, I think, something like except where removal is needed to accommodate an entranceway. I understand that they need to do that, or another structure that has no alternate position or something like that. But but we need some teeth in that right now. Right now, there's no teeth in any of that. And in the tree requirement, did we have a requirement for trees to be canopy trees that are replacing, or can they be crepe myrtles and understory trees as well?
It is canopy trees. There are some exceptions. I mean, we do work through some exceptions, like certainly when there's utility lines and things like that, trying to navigate that as best we can. So predominantly as canopy tree. I know we have in cases have had to do different trees because of the utilities.
Gotcha. Okay. Moving on to flood damage prevention ordinance. So reading through the resolution, it requires new non-residential construction to be elevated or flood-proofed. Is there a requirement for multifamily for that?
I am hoping Mary Beth Mumin, our stormwater engineer, is here today. Ernest is not available this evening, so I'm hoping Mary Beth can help with that answer.
Will need to be sworn in, please.
Yes.
Sabrina, are you here to help swear us in? You're muted.
I am. All right. Mary Beth, do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to present is the truth to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I think everyone else has previously been sworn in, so I think we're good right now. Thank you.
So far.
And actually, I see Sue, you're unmuted. So if you need to interrupt me, we mean to swear her in because she's actually a certified floodplain manager. My understanding is that any of the structures would need to be elevated or flood proofed per the ordinance. Not just commercial. So that would include the multifamily structures.
Okay. And the applicant, is that in your design? Is that part of the way you've designed the multifamily building?
It is.
Okay, thank you. To get back to traffic that Mr. Parker was talking about. So I understand that because of the right-of-way issues that we're not planning on building those 2 left turn lanes. The traffic impact analysis talks about there being 750 foot plus queues along Willow if we don't build those. Kumar, I don't know, did some of the mitigations you were going to explore, did they deal with that?
Yes, madam. There is already 375 feet exist in the left turn lane currently. And the revised timing plan and changing the payment planning, markings planning will definitely help bringing the level of service to D to E. In the PMP cover. Again, we are collecting some payment in lieu from the developer that will be used to analyze the intersection and making those changes in future.
Okay, and is that, when you talk about it going from D to E, is that at the 2028 build out or phase 1 or which?
It's including the phase 3, madam, all phases.
That's phase 3, okay. And with that extra queue length, will people be able to get into the church then? So if you're coming, say if you're coming southbound on Fordham and you turn onto Willow and you're trying to turn into the church and everybody's backed up, from my measurements, that has the potential to back way past the church entrance.
Not in the first driveway. They only can turn into left turn into the Harris Theater entrance and then come into the church.
But isn't the Harris Teeter entrance less than 150 feet from the entrance?
It is
from the Willow intersection?
It is almost 200, yeah, it's almost 200 feet, yes.
Okay, so if those queue lengths that were in the report come true, then the entrance would be blocked there.
Entrance won't be blocked because we're going to change the payment markings and also the signal type of phasing and also give more timing, which require to reprogram the complete timing plan on 1551, which anyhow we are planning to do that. So all those things will factor in to allow the traffic move out from Willow Drive to Fordham Boulevard.
Okay, and do you have any TIA analysis results you could point me to that show those numbers?
They are not exist. We did it a few weeks back after the church bought the concern. I'll be happy to email them this week, tomorrow to council.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm moving quickly here. The design standards show on the Estes Drive that there's the curb, an 8-foot tree planting zone, a multi-use path, and then a shrub zone. We just had issues on another project in Estes with Aura that didn't allow tree planting this close to the road. Is that going to be an issue here as well?
That's a good question, and I think we need to do a little bit of research into that. Let me see what I can find out.
All right, thank you. And the last one is just a comment for the applicant in the design guidelines that are in our packet on page 354. The legend on the picture with the outdoor amenity space still has optional 10-foot minimum. I know you've changed that in your other materials, but just to let you know that that needs to be changed on that diagram as well. Thank you.
Ms. Stegman?
I just wanted to ask a question about the tree canopy. Is the payment still part of that stipulation? The potential to do a payment instead of trees?
So that is an option, that they either retain the existing vegetation, plant new, or provide a payment in lieu, which is $525 per tree.
So how does that work? Obviously, our interest is having trees there on site. Is it just up to them to decide that, or is there a certain percentage of the total that they have to do on site, or how does that work actually?
So the ordinance is not does not clarify that. And I think that the ordinance gives the options to, basically existing, new, or a payment in lieu. And I think that's certainly something the council could consider. Is there a minimum there? I think the applicant has shown on their plans that they were close to that 20%. I mean, that they had additional plantings to get to that. So that would be something that we certainly could discuss with them to see if that would be amenable.
Yeah, I don't know what the exact rate percentage would be, but I would like to see an agreement to some minimum amount that I think is needed for, just pedestrian and customer kind of safety and well-being. Walking around in the summer, we know how that feels in North Carolina. So yeah, I would be interested in what kind of language we could put in, and also I guess the timeline of how long they have to meet that. We don't want to go, whatever, 6 years without any trees, and then kind of I'll do it at the end or something.
So we've been working, discussing some of these issues, the technical aspect of how this development unfolds. As we know, they are doing a fairly phased process. It's not all going to happen immediately. And they have given us, to me, the building blocks of that phases is each of those pods. And the intent and I think we've agreed in conversations with the applicant that as each pod comes forward, that pod would be as close as we could to compliance. I mean, there may be one pod where you have more, you may have less, but we're working that each pod is as close as we can to compliance, and that yes, we're not saving all of it to be caught in the end.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, and that kind of flexibility to make it up in one area or another, I think sounds quite reasonable. And I had another question that I have now forgotten. So what would be a good next step? Oh, I know what I remembered, so I'm going to go back to it. I appreciate Ms. Ryan pointing out the 30 versus 40% difference. I wasn't aware of that. And I'm wondering if, I know we don't know now, and that's part of the point of this plan is we don't know exactly what's going to be built, but is there a way to word it so that the math ends up right at the end? Like if it ends up 60% residential and 40 commercial, that the 30 and 40% are averaged. Is there a way to kind of make that math work so we get as close to the intent of the ordinance as we can? I think that would be great. And I'll look to to staff or other council members if anyone has a suggestion on sort of what the right percentage in terms of, I would like to see a percentage that they have to meet before they can go to the payment in lieu option on the trees. Thank you.
Other council member clarifying questions? Ms. Gu?
Yeah, well, I think that the last time when when we had the hearing, I had questions regarding the stormwater, and I read the new guidelines that the in the document regarding the stormwater. I think it says that a minimum of 90,000 square feet of impervious area will be treated using the green storm infrastructure. Do you have a diagram or map or something to show how these things are going to be done and where they're going to be, and especially when they're going to be built? Are they going to be built in the first phase or second phase, or what is the plan for that?
I would have to defer to the applicant to help with that.
Yeah, that'll be built in the first phase.
So do we have a map or diagram of what the structures are going, where they're going to be, or what they're going to be look like?
We
Beyond
presented
1,000?
a rough diagram back in May, but we'll have full drawings when the ZCP is submitted.
Okay, so is that area that near the entrance along the Elliott Road, is that the rain garden that you are referring to?
No, the largest area will be behind where the Circle K is.
Where the Circle is?
The gas station?
Oh, so that area. Okay, so that is just a concentrated area. So you're going to dedicate it to 90,000. Is that all the impervious surface improvement that you're proposing?
No, that'll just be the largest one that we're proposing.
Yeah, but that is part of this 90,000 square feet.
Right.
I mean, after I read through all your stormwater improvement, I think that's the main improvement you're going to have. All the others, like the percentage of the peak flow rate decrease and the 1% decrease reduction for the runoff volume, these are all based on that number, that 90,000 impervious surface, right? Is that?
Well, that, and we're also reducing impervious by 1.2 acres.
1.2 acres, but that full number, that numbers that I asked last time, I read through our staff's comments here as well. They're saying that there is no way that we can check on that. Is that correct? Like, the stormwater runs all in all the directions. We do not have the equipment to check that. I just trying to understand what the situation is.
So I from the town, I understand, and I'm hoping either Mary Beth or Sue, more seasoned stormwater folks, will answer. But it's similar how we want to measure traffic, but you can't measure. I mean, cars we can count, and we can't count the stormwater. It goes to too many points of analysis. You can't capture all of that. I don't know, Mary Beth, if you have a better response.
Yeah, and I read through Ernest's response to your question about this. This site would discharge to multiple different points, and there's also, I believe, probably off-site runoff coming through that area potentially as well. So it doesn't seem like a simple or great candidate for monitoring. Monitoring may be more of an appropriate conversation to have in the context of the petition that Councilperson Ryan spoke about earlier, kind of more like a overall effort from from the town.
So then how does the town verify what they said over here, like the reduction in runoff volume and the peak flow, if we do not have anything to check that? I mean, anyone can say anything they want to.
Well, we do require as-built drawings. So at the end of a project, every development is required to show that they are in fact, removing as much impervious. For example, this project would have to show that they are actually removing the amount of impervious that they're saying that they're going to remove. And that the stormwater control measures are built in the dimensions and with the correct control elevations based on their approved design. So there are checks in that regard.
Yeah, but at this time, I mean, of course, there is no detailed design with this green, the GSI structure, the green stormwater infrastructure that has been mentioned over there. So it seems like for us, or for, at least for me, I'm not, that to make this judgment of whether or not that this system is going to work, seems like there's very thin ground for me to make any judgment on that. Right? It's just like there's no verification or monitoring system would be possible. The only thing that we can verify will be this this 90,000 square feet of GSI that they said they're going to build. That's the only thing that at this time it seems like it's something that's verifiable.
Yeah, so we don't do monitoring for other development sites in the way that you're describing, but this development will be held to the town's regular stormwater management standards in addition to the other standards they've committed to, which include analyzing those additional storm events up to the 50 and 100-year storms, which aren't required by ordinance. And so that is something that we have not received the actual design calculations for, but that is something that will be reviewed by staff and it will be ensured to be in compliance with those standards before any permits are issued. So standard process as any other development, with the exception of the additional commitments they're making, which will also be reviewed.
Well, so you're saying, but those numbers, by my understanding, is based on the reduction in the impervious surface that they're saying they're going to reduce. It's only based on that the surface change, right? That's the only thing with regards to whether or not that actually going to work or whether or not that can, because this site is very sensitive. We all know that it's it's prone to be flooded and it's very close to the flood zone. I mean, part of it is within the flood zone and it's next to a community that's being flooded regularly. So of course, from the council perspective, we want this site, of course, those flooding issues cannot be only addressed by this like a neighboring site. There are lots of other sites, includes like the Aura site that we just discussed, all these things contributing to the flooding issues at the lower land. But this is still a major concern that both the council and the community has, is whether or not that this development, after it's going to be developed, is it going to be safe for both the residents over there and also for the neighboring communities. It seems like if there's no checking or monitoring, or at least there's some like stormwater bond or something to make sure that it's safe for the people to be live there, or for the neighbors from the neighboring communities, I feel like it's very hard for me to make a decision whether or not it's safe.
I think another thing to note is that the impervious surface that they're saying that needs to be removed right now, that doesn't mean that they still have to meet the standard. So if it turns out that they need to remove more, or they need to provide stormwater management or something in order to meet that standard, then then they will design to meet the standard. I don't know if Hunter, you could speak
Again,
to any preliminary designs or anything to address any of this.
Well, again, because the town's stormwater standards or the ordinance for the most of other sites is based on reduction or the change, is you cannot release more water, have more water runoff, has a higher peak runoff compared to the current condition, right? So, but this site is unique in the sense that it's not safe. If part of it is in the floodplain, it's easy to be prone to be flooded, and especially given the climate change. So I'm just saying that at its absolute level, the volume of water, like what the flood events is going to be at that level, it's not a change. Whether or not it's safe for that amount of development to be built on this flood site, and also for the neighboring communities, is that going to be safe? So I think that is the question. It seems like there's no assurance to say that it is going to be safe for that, both the residents on that site and the neighbors.
I do believe there was a commitment in the stipulations to no adverse impact on neighboring properties. There's also been a stipulation to develop an emergency evacuation plan, I believe, as well. So there are some efforts to definitely not worsen the situation, and also some efforts to mitigate it by things like removing impervious and providing some green infrastructure at this point.
No adverse flood impact or to offset properties or to offsite properties during the 100-year storm. How to measure that? How does, like, when the neighboring properties is flooded, how does anyone to make the judgment this is due to the negative impact from this property or some other properties? I mean, this is just a statement that there's no way to verify. Do you agree with me on that?
Well, the applicant will be required to use FEMA verified models to model the flood elevations. And so that will model the existing conditions and then model the proposed conditions to show that there is no rise in the flood elevations. I don't know if McAdams
Is that
would like to
somewhere
speak.
included over here? I do not remember. I read that.
I'm sorry, did you say you didn't recall reading that in the stipulations?
Well, I do not see that that shows the evidence because it's an evidential hearing. I do not remember that I've seen the evidence to support that.
Yes, I think that if McAdams could speak to the evidence, I think that as far as staff review goes, staff will review the design that is provided to ensure that it is in compliance with the standard town requirements as well as the additional requirements that the applicant has agreed to for this. And it's a requirement of the town's flood damage prevention ordinance that they do show that no increase in the flood elevation. And that will be reviewed by our, yeah.
Ms. Gu, you need to wrap up. It's been 11 minutes and just trying to.
Yeah, well, it's fine. I have asked on my question. I don't think that I'm hearing the answers I'm looking for.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from council members? All right, I will ask a couple then, thank you. I'm gonna go back to the design guideline standards. I've seen that you've put in some language to protect Willow Drive and some language now to protect Binkley. I want to know, I guess what gives me heartburn, and I'll need Brian Peterson for this as well, is the design guideline that says you can do a setback anywhere from 0 to a bigger number. And if you're putting in all these other ones, can we have some assurances that we're not going to be building right up on Fordham Boulevard, that we're leaving the berm or whatever we're doing to make sure that we're not having a 0 setback somewhere or that it doesn't conflict? So I don't know how to structure that in this, but I know that that was part of your design guidelines. And so do these requirements that you're putting in there about Willow and the church and everything, do they go all the way around the property, or what does that look like?
Yes, they do go all the way around the property. I was hoping that one of the applicants would respond. Seems like that's a question for their design detail.
Judy, I'm sorry, I'd be happy to respond. I have 4 different emails with possible condition language that I was trying to read, and I didn't hear the question. Could you ask it again, please, and I'll see how we can respond.
So in the design guidelines that were proposed, it still says in there setbacks to be from 0, and I'm sorry, I forget the bigger number. Yet there's now stipulations about Willow Drive having a certain setback and street frontage such that the trees are protected. There's now designs for against Binkley Baptist Church, so that will be protected. But I want to make sure that we're doing something different than a 0 setback along Fordham and the rest of Estes Drive, so that we're not using that 0 setback on this property, because we like the trees along the edge, we like the pathway, we like all that. And so I just want to know if that language could be changed or enhanced, or a commitment, a stipulation that they'll be looked at each side frontage to assure them, I don't know, that we're not building right up to the road.
Yeah, I can answer that. I mean, we tailored the frontage requirements around the trees. So in lieu of building the on-street bike lane on Estes, we did, which would have taken out all of the mature trees. We proposed the multi-use path on the other side of the trees, which preserved them and is also a safer condition. I believe there's a 30-foot buffer from back of curb to the existing parking lot, and that will remain. On Willow Drive, we actually didn't make any changes. It was just called out what we were proposing. And so that I think we presented last time, where the average building setback was, I think, close to 40 feet from the back of curb. And again, a big part of that was preserving those mature trees. That's also why that existing 5-foot sidewalk would remain. I know there were questions about shouldn't that be wider, but that was the sole reason that we were keeping that. On the Fordham side, there's an average of 50 feet from the existing, I guess there's no curb there, but the edge of the asphalt to the right of way or the property line there. And so there's no setback from that proposed, but you do have that 50-foot right of way between where the road stops and the property line starts. And that's where we'll have the hedge, we'll have the planting strip, and we'll have the 10-foot multi-use trail.
So why do you need the 0 setback language then? Why is it set at 0?
It's just a different way of doing it. It's just, we're defining the street sections, which are different on each of the streets, and then saying from behind those street sections, it's 0. And it's really another way of saying, like on Willow, I think it's technically 21 feet is the street section. So it said another way, it could be a 21-foot setback from the back of curb, but it was just a different way of doing it, I guess.
Okay. Are you planning on having EV charging stations in the parking deck?
Yeah, so we've committed to, I think, providing 3% and pre-wiring for, I think it's 20%. Is that the town standard now?
Yeah. Yes, I just want to make sure I hadn't seen that.
Yes.
I'm supportive of finding that mix on the tree canopy versus payment in lieu. And I didn't know if the applicant had discussed with Binkley at all about planting more trees on that property, which would keep them in the vicinity of the area, especially if you're going to be doing the multi-use path, if there's an opportunity there for tree planting as well.
Yeah, we have discussed that and plan to do so. And we also have proposed, I don't think Judy mentioned it specifically, but in that 10-foot existing buffer between the properties, we've also added some language, and we proposed that we enhance that buffer with more green screening. So that'll include various types of probably low-lying trees and hedge and other plantings.
Can you talk a little bit more about the apartment building proposed on Willow Drive? I know that you worked with our urban designer and you didn't, so the letter you wrote back saying that you didn't see turning the building, you saw that it had more negative effects. So can you talk a little bit about the articulation in the front, what it'll actually look like, feel like, so that it's on record for the public to hear about that?
Sure, I'll actually let Jeff do that.
Yeah, so we've taken an approach where we've essentially split the building into 3 different sections. We're using the articulation with these setbacks to break up the facade mass and the length of it. In other areas, the town requirements ask for a minimum, I think, of a 6-foot setback. A lot of the setbacks that we've included range from 30 to 45 feet in depth, which really creates the appearance of 3 separate blocks or masses of the building. And all of that is to break up the overall length of the building along Willow.
And the height of the building seen from Willow, I know the height of the building, it's lower to start, but that's the parking garage underneath, or can you talk about the height?
Yeah, so the height of the building along Willow on the northern end, kind of closest to Harris Teeter, is at, I believe, 59 feet above street level. As Willow drops, as you head closer to Estes, it's, I think, a high of 72 feet. So as it slopes, the maximum height of the building is 72 feet.
Okay. Thank you. We may have a few more questions. Oh, Mr. Boynton, did you have a question, please?
Yep, thank you. So I'm just curious, but has there been any assessment done of stormwater runoff impacts if conditions on the property remain the same? How that might look, say, 5 years out, 10 years out from now?
I'll take that, and Mary Beth, you can chime in if you have any other opinion, but no, the short answer there is no, we have not looked at, how the current site or really the entirety of the watershed, modeling wise looks from stormwater impacts, and how that might affect the stream health in the future.
That's go ahead, sorry.
That's correct. Yes, for the existing condition, that would typically be handled through a subwatershed study, which the town has been pursuing piece by piece. Also could be part of the petition that Ms. Ryan described earlier.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, take the opportunity to hear from our public. We know we have a few people registered in advance, that you will need to be sworn in. If you are wishing to speak on this item and didn't sign up ahead of time, please use the raise hand function or *9 on your phone. Mr. Parker will call you in 2 at a time. Probably have to get you sworn in if you haven't been sworn in before. And we do ask you to keep your comments within 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, we have Robert Hornick, followed by Virginia Gray.
If we can get Ms. Gray in at the same time, we could do the 2 of you together to be sworn in. There you are. Ms. Oliver will swear you in.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to present is the truth to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Thank you.
I don't know whether I should go first or let Ms. Gray go first. I want
Mr.
to be a
Hornick,
gentleman.
you were called first, so let's have you go first, please.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Bob Hornick. I'm an attorney with the Bro Law Firm here in Chapel Hill, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Binkley Baptist Church. first thing I want to do is I want to express gratitude towards town staff and towards Jeff Kurtz and Ashley Paulspun in particular, because I first spoke with everybody on Friday morning about my client's concerns and got pretty much immediate response, so that by this morning, Judy Johnson had presented us with a set of proposed amended stipulations that went a long way towards addressing all of my client's concerns. As everyone I think here is aware, the Binkley Baptist Church is kind of a little bit of an oasis there in the woods surrounded by the mall. And two of the biggest concerns that the church leaders expressed were, first of all, the traffic concern, making sure that traffic was not to and from the church campus was not impacted. And I think that we've gotten commitments from the developer and through stipulations to that effect. And secondly was to, as much as possible, preserve the kind of serene nature, particularly when you're looking out from the sanctuary. You can barely tell that Fordham Boulevard is there. You can barely tell that Willows Drive is there. And therefore, maintenance of the trees in that area was of primary concern to us. And I think we have a commitment through conditions, stipulations, and discussion with the developer that before any work is done on the multi-use path along Fordham Boulevard, that there will be consultation, there'll be site visits, and we'll have an opportunity to help them map out where that 10-foot wide path will go, so as to minimize or maybe even avoid, would be our hope, damaging any of the trees along the Fordham Boulevard frontage. The other item that was of real concern to us was that there had been initially, as I read the original proposed resolution, an ability to have a 75-foot tall building butting up against our property line on what I call the K&W side. And that has now been reduced so that the maximum height they can have over there is 34 feet, at least until 100 feet back from the property line. And I think that, together with the augmented buffer, 10-foot buffer along that property line, will significantly protect the church from having a 6-story building looking down on a 1-story church, which would be totally unacceptable. So again, I want to express gratitude for the quick work of the town staff and for the responsiveness of the developer in addressing our concern. And we certainly look forward to working with them as they move along with actually designing the project.
Thank you, Mr. Hornick.
Okay, Virginia Gray, followed by Janet O'Neill.
Hi, I'm Virginia Gray, and I have a few points to make about the University Mall project. First, the good news is that the majestic oaks along Willow Drive will be retained, and I'm very happy about that. There's still some problematic areas, at least they were problematic in the materials I read. I am heartened by some of tonight's discussion that maybe some of the points I will bring up might be taken care of down the road. So first, in contrast to all the other developments in town that focus on dense residential development with little commercial or retail space, this project offers a great potential for retail and other commercial uses. And so I think it's in the town's best interest to maximize this use over the residential or the hotel space. And I worry that the potential that's left in the plans for the developer to convert unused commercial space to residential space will tempt the developer to do just that. If so, that will hurt the town's bottom line. So I hope the council will take steps to prevent the developer from making that swap. Secondly, I want to talk about the tree canopy for a second. The developer, as has been said already tonight, proposes a 20% tree canopy. And he argues that's better than the existing 13% tree canopy. And he argues that it be met by a combination, as it's been said, of existing trees, new trees, and in lieu payments. And the town planning staff agreed with the developer, which I was discouraged by, because LUMO requires that there be a 30% tree canopy for this kind of zoning. And the Planning Commission, the Environmental Stewardship Committee, and the Stormwater Management Utility Advisory Board have all specified that there should be a 30% standard. And so I ask you, when the roll is called up yonder and someone asks you what you did to save the planet from global warming, is your answer going to be, I did my part by ignoring our comprehensive town plan, our climate action plan, our boards and commissions, and especially I voted to accept money from a developer in lieu of actually planting trees. Is this really what you want your legacy to be, to allow developers to get off the hook? And then lastly, the impervious surface. It's the same kind of deal. The developer wants to reduce the 78% impervious surface to 75% and get patted on the head for that, but not reduce it to the required 70%. And again, you've had all kinds of plans and the various boards and commissions that have said that that 70% standard should be upheld. And it, of course, impacts, it of course impacts the fact that I should shut up now and let somebody else talk. So, well, thank you very much.
Ms. Gray, thank you. Mr. Parker, you can call the next two in together. Yep. Thank you.
Janet O'Neill and Julie McClintock, please. You can be sworn in.
Julie.
We're waiting on Ms. McClintock to swear you in together. So just a minute, please.
Okay. All right. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to present is the truth to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Neill first, then Ms. McClintock.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Town Council and other participants. My name is Janet O'Neill and I'm a member of Binkley Church and I'm speaking on behalf of the church tonight. We need to say first how much we deeply appreciate that we have brought concerns to the town and to the developers, and both have responded by listening and making modifications for which we are very grateful, and thank you for your speed in working with us on that. I know that you have read and that you're hearing tonight a lot of details about specifications, easements, and other legal matters, and these are certainly important. But as a church, there are other facts that are perhaps less tangible, but equally important to us. So I want to bring to your attention this fact of our experience as a church and hope that that will help support why these modifications and stipulations are so important to us. If you know anything about Binkley Church, you're aware of our commitment and action to social justice, but you may be less aware of our equally important role in offering and providing opportunities for contemplation, respite, and simply resting in the beauty of nature. This is a gift we offer our congregation and our community to restore and invigorate us for the service that we believe in, both locally and beyond. As the poet says, "Be still, these great trees are prayers." And certainly trees are important to us, not just for their significance in combating the negative effects of climate change, but also the obvious aesthetic appeal. But additionally, for us, there's the spiritual reminder that we're connected to something greater than ourselves. In our indoor sanctuary, as has been said tonight, we look out on trees in every direction. We are a certified natural wildlife area, and we incorporate care and collaboration with nature into our ministry. In addition to our congregation's relationship with our grounds, the community uses Binkley Church pretty much like a park. Throughout the pandemic, even with our building closed, there have been people who walk around the property daily, students who work with their laptops in the courtyard, families bringing their children to the playground, and seekers using the courtyard labyrinth, as well as groups that hold meetings in the shade of our trees. Our church is home to many community groups, including preschool and a child care center, We host several 12-step programs such as AA that voice their appreciation for being uplifted by simply arriving on Binkley grounds. So indeed, we have both an interior and an outdoor sanctuary, and both are equally important to us. We're all aware of the significant development in this area all along Fordham Boulevard, and Binkley Church is a place of much needed green space for everyone. We're not a service station or a grocery store, and for us, green space and landscaping is not just desirable, but essential to our mission. We have long been a supportive partner of University Place, and we continue to hope for a vibrant place for people to live, work, and shop. As you've heard on other occasions, our beloved longtime pastor, Robert Seymour, referred to Binkley as the church in the marketplace. We want to continue this tradition, but not in the shadow of the marketplace, but rather as a sanctuary to the marketplace, enhancing the lives and the work for all who live, the lives and work for people there. We've been a good partner, and now we need to ask you to be a partner with us in protecting and enhancing this place of sanctuary in Chapel Hill. And closing, I just want to invite you all to come spend some time at our beautiful church, sit in our gardens, and join us in our commitment to the community. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, we have Julie McClintock followed by Michelle Laws.
Hi there, good evening. The first thing I wanted to say was to think about the relationship of University Mall to all the upstream areas. We've talked about this before, but of course, there are many other projects other than Aura that are already permitted but not built. So when that happens, what happens is in the lower parts of the watershed, which is where U Mall is located, those areas become more prone to flooding incidences, and it's called changing conditions. So so what we do with Stormwater Matters, and I appreciate all the good questions that Hong Bin raised earlier. But tonight I really like to raise the question about what we know about this permit and what we don't know. And I, as a long-time resident of Chapel Hill, 50 years, I am a little confused about actually what we know, because I went in today and read the application and I found out that there's a lot that's unknown. We don't know, for example, the height of the buildings. We don't know the setbacks necessarily. Maybe we do through the design guidelines, but that part is, I think, not well known to the public. We don't know about the parking standards. We don't know about the buffers to be determined. So there's a lot we don't know. And I'm struck by the fact that the applicant wants certain things that are known. For example, infrastructure, the highways around, roads around the mall. And then we think of water and sewer. And I'm thinking of the Rogerson Pump Station. And I read something in the application materials from OWASA that was written way back in 2019 that says that, gee, we didn't expect all this growth, and we're going to have to do something to our Rogerson Pump Station. So this kind of underscores the point that all this growth actually costs. So I think the public really needs to know what's in this application. It makes me really uncomfortable that there's so much that isn't known. And please correct me if I'm wrong. And then there's the aspect of the application that where it asks for a lot of exemptions, but it's hard to look at exemptions or exceptions when you don't know exactly what's being proposed. It's a little bit like buying a pig in a poke, as they say. So I can't determine whether this project actually meets the 4 findings or not. Does it do harm to the neighborhoods? I mean, how do I know? Because I don't know all the facts about the application. So I urge the town council not to approve this permit because just not enough is known. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll bring in Michelle Laws already here. We'll bring in the next person too to be sworn in together, please.
Yes, we have Michelle Laws and then followed by Linda Brown.
Okay. Ms. Laws and Ms. Brown, do you swear or attest that the evidence you're about to present is the truth to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Thank you.
So
We'll have Ms. Laws first and Ms. Brown. Thank you.
thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to acknowledge the important role that Binkley has played in the Black Lives Matter movement and in the social justice movement, in movements, the various ones in Chapel Hill, a place where I was born and raised. I was born at Memorial Hospital, grew up in many parts of Chapel Hill, including public housing community. And I'm not sure if the developers have, it's clear they've met Binkley folk. I'm not sure if they've gone across the street from the Circle K, across Fordham Boulevard, into one of our oldest public housing communities. And my fear is, or my hope is, let me start on say in a positive way. My hope is that if this is approved, that you will get to know your neighbors. They aren't the affluent people in Chapel Hill. Many of them are Black and people of color, and they represent some of our most vulnerable and lowest income residents in Chapel Hill. And so some might say that they don't have a voice. But I surely hope that you will be good neighbors to those residents as well. And what I mean by good neighbors is that they won't be subjected to what we're hearing in what I hear is happening in downtown Durham that has been gentrified, and developers, mostly white residents, have moved in, affluent residents have moved in, and they are not too kind to the locals, to the Black people who've lived there, to the poor folk, to the homeless people, to those who are counted among the least of us. And so my fear is that harm will be done. I hope that we don't see what we are seeing in other areas where people move in and they have no regard whatsoever to the least of these. And so I hope you get to know those neighbors. I hope also we will not see an increase in crime reports because people are walking up the street in the new development and they are perceived as being out of place when they are very much in place. They've been there. Some people are generations in that public housing community. So I just want to put that on the record and encourage the developers to reach out to those members of that community, get to know them. And also if there are jobs that are going to be available, I'm sure that they will welcome that too. And work with the NAACP if you find it awkward, if these aren't your kind of folk that you're used to doing business with, we can certainly help make that introduction and it help you to engage with that community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Linda Brown, and I do not have any other raised hands at this moment.
Welcome.
Thank you. University Place is the geographic center of Chapel Hill and has the potential to become the heart of the town. It should be the place where we come together for large community events and gatherings. And given the impact of the coronavirus, having large outdoor spaces for dining and shopping that can be used almost year-round is imperative and will be for some time. Turning the old mall inside out and into a community marketplace is exactly how that can be done. To create spaces that are inviting to all would require making a commitment to provide affordable retail and dining space available to small businesses. The small, unique businesses that invite shoppers to stroll, browse, and buy, give people in other parts of the triangle a reason to come to Chapel Hill to shop or dine. The reason people come to a mall in the first place is to look for those kinds of unique items that can't be found on Amazon, the things that one wants to touch in order to judge the quality or see to be assured of a perfect color match. Flexible spaces for temporary uses can also be included along with formal and informal dining spaces. The central location of University Place makes it the ideal and convenient place for our farmers market, and providing spaces available to local businesses can also help contribute to the economic growth of the town. While few multifamily units can be added to the mix, they should not tower above the surrounding community. There should be affordable for sale, let me say that again, for sale units, complemented by affordable for sale townhouses for people who work in Chapel Hill and many of whom commute from as far away as Alamance County. Chapel Hill does not need any more luxury apartments. If you get it right, University Place could be transformed into a true destination place. Getting it wrong would be disastrous. Please take the time to get it right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that, Ms. Brown, was our last speaker.
Okay, I bring it back to council. We do have to hear from our applicant. So we're not, it's just questions again right now, not comments. We'll hear from our applicant first. Other questions? Okay, Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. We appreciate the time that all of you have put into the 5 hearings that we have had to produce evidence to you about this particular development. But ask you as a housekeeping matter, although your agenda so states, all of the materials in your packet are part of your evidentiary package, and I would ask that they all be received into evidence. That includes a letter that we forwarded to Colleen Wilger on June 23rd, 2021 that answered additional questions that were raised in the last meeting. And with that housekeeping piece and the acceptance of that information into evidence, I just want to talk to you very briefly about the 4 findings that you will need to make tonight in this SUP application. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the stipulations that we have before you. As you know, this is a special use permit process. And in a special use permit process, you are analyzing matters based on the evidence that's before you. There are 4 findings that you need to make. Once an applicant has produced competent evidence to support the 4 findings that you need to make, the burden shifts to those who are opposed to the project, if anyone is, to produce evidence to the contrary. We have heard some good citizen input. I've not heard from citizens evidence to suggest that the 4 findings have not been met. There are questions certainly always about development and how to do it and whether to do it. But I believe that the evidence that you have before you from the competent witnesses meets the 4 findings. The first finding that you have is that the project as proposed is located, designed, and proposed to be operated to maintain and promote the public health, safety, and general welfare. As we go into a review of this project, I don't need to remind the council that this is a modification of an SUP and this is an existing development. We don't have the luxury of starting afresh with no development whatsoever. We are tasked with the job of trying to figure out how to modify an existing SUP in a way that allows this developer to bring life back to University Place, to bring economic life back to University Place. You will recall in one of our hearings, Casey Cummings testified to you about the status of malls in America and the decline of malls in America. And what this project is an opportunity for this council to do is to promote the general welfare by providing a revised way to have those kind of economic interests met in this community. When Linda Brown testified a moment ago, she was talking about the importance of our having places we can shop in our community, about having places that minority-owned businesses can function. We have committed to provide that type of space, to provide incubator space, and to use this particular space in a way to bring the public in and to bring development in to promote the general public health, safety, and welfare. We have talked a lot tonight about the tree canopy. And again, it's important for us to remember as you evaluate the evidence that you have, that the current tree canopy is about 13%. This developer has proposed to meet a 20% tree canopy, and if necessary, to make a payment in lieu to reach the 30% to the extent that they can't get from the 20 to the 30. There has been a commitment to do the 20%. I have tried to read some stipulations to deal with some of those concerns while also listening to the evidence. But our commitment is to add trees as possible and to try to get to a 30%, with the least amount being payment in lieu. That is possible, consistent with developing on an already developed site. We have talked about stormwater, and we have talked about what those studies mean. I will point out to you that you've had some testimony about monitoring and some questions about monitoring. The town of Chapel Hill has not required anyone to put in a monitoring program to monitor water coming off their site. You don't do that because it's not a particularly possible thing to do, and to attempt to oppose that on this particular development when it's not proposed on any other, I think is singling this development out. And in addition to that, I am not sure under the state statutes on stormwater that's a requirement you can impose. What we have done instead, and what you have in your evidence, is testimony from a qualified expert in stormwater as to the design he can put into place and the work he can do and seal and provide. You have a competent stormwater staff at the town of Chapel Hill that will monitor his work, will monitor what we do, and will assure that we have done what we said we would do in the stipulations that we have proposed. It is not insignificant that in lieu of leaving University Place as it is, that this developer is proposing a change that will add about 1.2 acres of pervious surface to what has been impervious. That alone is a benefit to the public health, safety, and welfare. The developer doesn't have to change the property at all. The developer can find a way to use it in its current state. What the developer is proposing to do instead is to make it better, to make improvements, to work with those changes. And I think that is another example where the development as proposed maintains and promotes the public health, safety, and general welfare. You have street and intersection improvements that also are addressed in the TIA that will be sure that this project as proposed at least maintains the traffic situations that we have with U-Mall now, and in many ways promotes more positive change. For example, you're going to have much greater bicycle and pedestrian connectivity and better access for public transit by virtue of the work that's being done. So that's just some highlights of the evidence there. I don't want to go through 5 weeks of evidence to talk about that first factor, but those are some highlights that I think are important as you think about this project. And I ask that you think about this project from the standpoint of what it is, which is a modification of something already on the ground, and a modification to make changes to something that's already on the ground to improve it. The second requirement that you must find is that this project complies with the required regulations and standards of LUMO. Your staff report includes a project fact sheet that shows the site development standards and where they're met and where there's a request for modification. Your modification procedure in your ordinance is part of your special use permit process, and I contend to you that it is likewise evidentiary based and not purely discretionary, but something you would consider based on the evidence before you. You have in your land use management ordinance at section 4.5.6 a provision that provides that where the actions, designs, or solutions that are proposed by an applicant are not literally in accord with your applicable regulations, but you can find that in that particular case, the public purposes are satisfied to an equivalent or greater degree, you may make specific modifications of the regulations in that case. And in this particular matter, we are asking you to use that to make several modifications that on balance provide you the meeting of public purposes that are very important in your your LUMO. Examples are that the dimensional regulations, the buffer regulations are replacing some of your standard setback with build-to zones and greater heights. What that allows is that allows a reduction of building footprints, creates the density that you're seeking in your land and your plans, and provides it in a way that allows us to have less impervious surface than we would have if we were not doing that. Likewise, the impervious surface ratio that is there, we cannot totally meet the impervious surface ratio, but we're improving it substantially. Without the modification, it's not improved at all. It would not be reduced by 1.2 acres. It would not be reduced. The reduction in parking that we propose, the modification there, which I've not heard any concern about, also reduces impervious surface and promotes our ability to provide better bicycle and pedestrian connectivity. The sign modification we've proposed is in keeping with what's really currently in place. The RCD modification we proposed, the evidence that's before you indicates that the modeling of the Bowling Creek floodplain shows improvements. The improvements have no impact to create or increase the existing floodplain elevation. And that evidence is before you in the form of both what your staff has determined and what our expert has determined. We also know that this work and this reduction will reduce some nutrient runoff. So again, the evidence shows that your public purposes in your ordinance are being met by the development proposal that you have and the provision that you have in your ordinance to allow an applicant to come up with solutions, particularly in a setting where you're not working with virgin ground, allows you to advance your public purposes. The third requirement, the third finding you have to make is the project is located, designed, and proposed to be operated so as to maintain or enhance the value of contiguous property. Case law suggests that is purely a valuation question, and you have an MAI appraisal report in your evidence, which is unrefuted, that it maintains or enhances. It is a development that is going to be improved and modernized, and the existence of the development has determined land value for contiguous properties for a period of years, and improving it and making it more modern will maintain or enhance those values according to the expert. I'm very happy to hear Mr. Hornick testify tonight, and appreciated the comments that Mr. Hornick made about the work that this applicant has done with Binkley Baptist Church and with the staff to address their concerns. And what I heard Mr. Hornick say is that his client is happy with the stipulations that we've all worked on and reached. And so I'm pleased with that. And so I do not think there's any evidence to the contrary on finding number 3. Finding number 4 is that the development conforms to the general plans for the physical development of the town as embodied in LUMO and in your comprehensive plans. The staff did a nice job of pointing out in their staff report, which is part of your evidence, that this particular development would meet the goals of creating a place for everyone, supporting a community properties, facilitating getting around, developing good places and new spaces, and nurturing our community. Your future land use map designates this site for precisely what's proposed here, which is multifamily shops and offices, with commercial and offices primary and multifamily and residential is secondary. One of the individuals who spoke from the public tonight raised a question about the balance between commercial, and as you will recall, as we've been through this hearing process, we have reduced the formula for conversion to assure that the balance remains heavier on the commercial side in this development, and there's not the ability to make it more residential than commercial the way it's designed. The mayor asked me earlier tonight about the stipulations that were proposed. There were 133 stipulations in revised resolution A. We have 4 more from the church, so they're now 137. The applicant, with the revision to 33L and 36 that Judy pointed out to you, the applicant agrees with the 133 in resolution A and the 4 additional stipulations that she's provided you with regard to concerns raised by Binkley Baptist Church. Those include stipulation 13 about the farmer's market, which we worked on. Ms. Anderson and I worked on that stipulation last meeting, and it is in the packet and it's part of what we have agreed to do. Stipulation 23, which is additional improvements to the stormwater plan. Stipulation 8, which tightens the process for working with the design standards. Let me answer a question that was asked. Ms. Anderson indicated I might be able to answer it. As I interpret what we've asked you to do tonight, the design standards will be part of the stipulations in the special use permit. And so they are not merely precatory. They are not merely a suggestion. They are actually part of what we have to comply with under the special use permit. And once they are finalized, working with the staff and with the town manager, with the urban planner, and with the CDC, once they are finalized, they'll actually be recorded and run with the land along with the special use permit, which gives you, I think, the protection and answers the question that was asked earlier tonight. I mentioned briefly the conversion rates that's within stipulation 6. And we've mentioned the Binkley stipulations. We have settled on a way to deal with the affordable housing piece based upon the poll that you did, and that's reflected in stipulations 14 to 19. Stipulations 20 to 31 are stormwater stipulations that are again designed to be sure that the project promotes public health, safety, and welfare and provides the kind of protections that we'll do what we say we're going to do, because that's what our permit will require when you approve it. Likewise, stipulation 33 deals with the road improvements. And we have been working on stipulation 12 on the trees. I have been looking at that. In short, in this quasi-judicial process, your role is to decide on whether we can modify a special use permit to allow changes to an existing building. And that decision is based on the evidence that's before you. It's based on the fact that we're modifying from an existing use, and that in the absence of a modification, the use continues as it is. And so you are evaluating the proposal against what is, not just what might be if we were working from a totally clean slate. This applicant has produced in your record competent material and substantial evidence to support the 4 findings. It has done so through expert testimony. You have heard the qualifications of the experts who have testified. The stipulations, I believe, have addressed your concerns. We have a much better proposal and project before you tonight as a result of the hard work that we have done with you and with your staff to answer questions. And we would ask tonight that you approve this request for modified special use permit. And with that, unless you have other questions from our team, Madam Mayor, I believe that that's the conclusion of the evidentiary portion of your hearing on this project.
Thank you. Council members, if you have questions to still ask, and if we have comments to share, do we want to hear from our own attorney about the particulars on this process? Good, Ms. Anderson.
Did you have questions? Did you have questions for me?
Do we have questions for Ms. Anderson? Ms.
About process, obviously.
About process, Ms. Gu.
Yeah, well, about this process, can you, well, I think the applicant has made it repeatedly with regard to what's the criteria for this SUP hearing. Given that it's a modification, it's a infill development on a parcel that has already been developed. So what is the role of current LUMO expectation and how much weight that should be played in our consideration versus, let's say, because it's infill development, almost like anything they do is an improvement. So is that, what is your understanding, like how much improvement is enough? Or put it in another way, what is the, because we have the current LUMO, it has the standards with regard to tree canopy, impervious surfaces. Should these be put aside simply because this development is an improvement from the existing condition? I just want to hear what you your thoughts are on this.
Right. Well, some of what you're asking me verges on me substituting my judgment for yours. And as you know, I won't do that. But I think that, I think if I'm understanding you correctly, the question relates to probably standard number 2, which is to the extent that they don't strictly meet the letter of the LUMO, what, you know, how far can they acceptably deviate? And that's for you to determine under standard 2, understanding that they are asking for modifications to the regulations because this is an existing long-term development. Other than that, you know, all I can say is that that is where council's judgment begins. And the difference, of course, here is that you're not basing it on pure judgment, pure legislative judgment, but on the evidence in the record, which, you know, Ms. Neese Brown talked about. So that is how this differs from a legislative process. And
what if there are evidence for both sides? On one side, it's clearly deviate what the current LUMO expectations are for this site. On the other hand, there is, of course, there is also clear evidence that there is improvement from the current condition. So you're saying how to weigh both sides of the evidences is the decision or the judgment of the council, like which side we think is more important. There is no expectation or law or anything that will say what is which one should play a larger role or anything. I'm just trying to hear your
right. It's, I mean, I think it is a balancing, and the standard is set forth in the LUMO, and you know, I can't really alter it with my own analysis of it, but it does say that in a particular case, the public purposes are satisfied to an equivalent or greater degree. And I think that's the standard in the LUMO that you apply to those modifications to regulations. And I think that you do have to take into consideration the nature of each individual application. So the nature of the existing university place is going to be your baseline. And then of course the evidence in the record. So I think that's probably the best I can do. If applicant's counsel disagrees with me, she'll speak up. But that's how I would guide you without going into any territory that would sort of substitute judgment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for Ms. Anderson? Okay. General comments from council members, Ms. Ryan.
There we go. That's better.
Madam Mayor, just before we get into comments, I believe some stipulations were being either revised or rewritten. And since those stipulations might influence folks' comments, can we see those first?
Are we able to see those between Ms. Neese and Ms. Anderson and Judy Johnson?
There has been a lot of behind the scenes work. So if you could be patient just for a minute, I think that Judy could probably pull that language together. She's been furiously working behind the scenes here.
Thank you, Judy.
So the top couple are modified stipulations. These are stipulations that we have. The underline, we've tried to obviously highlight added the new text to that. I'm trying to make that a little bit bigger. We discussed the first two earlier. These were somewhat part of our presentation. This third one here was trying to address the concern about preserving existing trees on the property. So we've added this landscape protection as one of our standard SIPs. And so we added a sentence in here that existing trees in excess of a 4-inch caliber shall be retained unless in conflict with a driveway entrance, reconfigured internal street, required infrastructure, and a building unable to be located elsewhere. So that's a new one from this evening. And then these 4 are the stipulations that we have discussed with you, talking about access during construction to Binkley, increasing buffer, or just stating the buffer, the height, that's Bob Hornick was discussing this, the 34 feet for a minimum of 100 feet, and then the pedestrian cross access. So those are the ones that we have been working with the applicant and are in agreement on at this point.
Okay, back to Ms. Ryan, then Ms. Gu.
Yeah, to stay on the stipulations issue, there were some other things that I heard. I know Ms. Stegman raised the issue about when they're required, what level would they be required, or would they be able to shift to a payment in lieu on their trees? I would be okay with it going with 20%, which was their original proposal for what they were putting on site. I think they know they can do that. So I would throw that out there to see if what people.
And Ms. Ryan, we agree to that. Our intention was to try to address the gap between the 20 and the 30 by talking about the payment in lieu. If we cannot do that on the ground, so we certainly are comfortable with the 20%. And you're right, we think we can do that, and we will do that.
Ms. Stegman, does that meet your interest?
If it states that directly, that's the minimum, and with efforts to do more, but the gap would be made up with payment in lieu.
One of the other issues was that I know there's some confusion about what the Department of Transportation actually allows on different street frontages in terms of placement of street.
And we did find out a little bit of clarity since you asked that question earlier. So in talking with the applicant, they have a planting strip, but then their tree planting strip is outside of the right of way. And so DOT's standards would be within the right of way, like that planting strip. So their tree plantings will occur outside of the right of way.
Okay, that's great news. We had also talked about some language about how modification from the design standards can be obtained. Is there anything in there now that talks about that?
I haven't gotten to that yet. I will work on it.
Okay.
So I will just note that the design standard document itself has language in there, but you may want to have that as a stipulation outside of the design standards.
Okay, and we have pretty standard language in a lot of our different ordinances about how that works. So I think probably it makes sense to apply those in this case.
Hey, Judy, I think that's in stipulation number 8 in the design standards. There's language about minor modifications.
And I especially had some concerns about the not doing the original 2 left turn lanes at Willow. I don't know if the applicant would be okay with doing an evaluation after phase 1 to making sure that the intersection is performing at least at a level E with queue lengths that aren't interfering with the Binkley driveway.
Yeah, I think the issue with that is that there isn't the ability to expand or to widen there as the staff has noted previously. So I'm not sure what we're studying to be done.
Kumar seemed to feel confident that the mitigations that they were planning would be adequate. But just because there's not right of way, I can't approve a development that's going to cause big traffic problems in the area. That's not being a good caretaker of the town interests. So I think Kumar is our expert and I trust him, but I think that checking up to make sure that that's working, and if it's not working, that there's some sort of way that we can seek a remedy and find a solution to that before you go forward into phases 2 and 3 is really important. And I don't know, Judy, if you have any suggestions or.
No, I got to think about it for a second.
You got to think about that. Okay. So while Judy's thinking, Mary, do you want me to get started with comments?
Yeah, go ahead with your comments and then we'll move to Ms. Gu.
Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to say that I very, very much want the applicant to be able to redevelop this property successfully. It really is one of the hearts of Chapel Hill. I've shopped there for 20 years. It's a really important place to get right. And so I do want that to happen. But according to the evidence presented, I don't find that the current iteration of the project complies with the 4 findings. So in terms of finding 2, that it complies with the regulations and standards of LUMO. I don't find that public purpose is met by allowing a modification of the regulations to our impervious surface and RCD standards. In our future land use map, which is a constituent part of our comprehensive plan, principles for this corridor state that the town should leverage redevelopment as an opportunity to reduce overflows into the focus areas, historically flood-prone locations. The downstream issues are very serious here. The current regulations are in place recognize this, and I think we need to maintain these lowest reduction possible. You know, I'm happy that that your proposal makes it better, but I think we need to make it really better. So I think that I don't agree that the modification is meeting the public purpose. So without those modifications, the project does not meet standards. And there are some places where I feel that the project does not meet finding 4 and it conforms with the LUMO comprehensive plan. So per the future land use map, the principal state is large parcels redevelopment regulating plans should be provided in order to address overall connectivity as well as walkability, bikeability, and activation. The staff memo we received on page 218 doing the design guidelines notes that the pod approach and lack of requirements for block sizes or building length in the design standards mean we do not have that kind of regulating plan for this property. Second, also from in the Flume principles, it states in order to ensure a human scale built environment, as building height increases at the front setback line, wider sidewalks should be utilized. The corridor principles in the Flume say that this particular area should be offering wide sidewalks in recognition of its more urban character. So I find that the current streetscape on Willow with the 5-foot sidewalks doesn't meet those standards. And the last one, per the future land use map principles on page 29, says multi-family residential character types call for designers to consider stepping back the building above the 3rd or 4th story to frame the public space rather than overwhelm it, and to avoid long, interrupted, and monotonous building facades to add visual interest to the street. I think the current Willow building, it certainly doesn't meet the step back requirement, and it's a very, very long building. I know there is some articulation, but I don't think it's sufficient for a building of this size. In other places, we've required pass-throughs or some kind of permeability. This building does not have those. And the design standards also do not hold future large buildings to these standards. So for those reasons, I find that this application does not meet the 4 findings. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Gu.
Well, I also remember that the University Place, or at the time it's called University Mall, is the place that I remember that when I came to Chapel Hill 26 or almost 30 years ago, that's the first place that I visited, because I think it's just a landmark place that. Well, I think it's the only place that I know that where to go shopping. And I remember that when I got my first bicycle, because that's the only thing I can afford, I ride my bicycle to the University Place. So it is something that we all feel like very dear to our heart, and we wanted it to have a good outcome and a good future. So I think that I welcome a new development proposal, the infill opportunities to make this project better. Again, I think that I have expressed my multiple concerns during the review process, but I think some of them, I think it has been probably addressed, well, at least to my criteria with regard to like the renditions of the building along the Willow Drive. And I actually really like the way that how it is presented, how the building is interacting with the street. And I really appreciate this opportunity of these bike lanes. I think it's a significant improvement. But on the other hand, I think these are all good things. But on the other hand, I think there's a baseline, which is the safety. And I worried at this time that this site is not going to be safe, given what is coming that we're expecting from both the climate change and also the increased flood that's going to be generated, the runoff is going to be generated from upland development, as we have seen in Aura development. I think these things are going to, of course, I'm not saying this side is going to be responsible for all that. That wouldn't be reasonable. But at least I would say it is too risky for us to say to allow those variations at this time, given the situation for this project to deviate from the tree canopy and from the impervious surface. I just cannot make a case that why this is safe for the future residents and for the neighbors. I feel like these things need to be done very cautiously, and the stormwater issue and the flooding issue should be the top number one if this project is have the next rendition to have another discussion. I'm hoping that our staff is going to work with the applicant to work out that part. It is a part that after I read through the whole proposal, it's a part that I just cannot settle and feel like I can let this to move forward. So at this time, I have serious concerns with the public safety and health coming from this project. So I'm not ready to, I do not think the evidence has convinced me to say that it satisfied the four criteria to allow for the SUP.
Other council members? Mr. Parker?
Thank you. This is a tough one. I fully understand, I think as my two colleagues have said, everybody wants the mall to succeed. Everybody wants the mall to be successful. And I think that the project goes a long way, certainly goes a very long way to making that happen. I also believe that the project is improving what is right now not a very good situation. It reduces impervious surface. It puts in place stormwater management mechanisms that are not currently there. It reduces parking. It floodproofs many of the facilities there. So I think on balance, for all of those issues, it's an improvement. The tree canopy goes from a minimum, from 13% to a minimum of 20% and possibly higher. So I think for the most part, this is a project that has a lot of benefits. My major concern is really with the building along Willow Drive. The length of it certainly concerns me in spite of the articulation. And we've talked a lot about ways of making it better, some of which the applicant has agreed to, some the applicant has not. But at the end of the day, this is a quasi-judicial proceeding. It is applying to a project, to a built environment that already exists. We are not starting with a blank slate or an empty piece of land. And so while I certainly have reservations, and particularly my reservations are centered on the building along Willow, I do not feel that the shortcomings in that building rise to the level where they cause the four findings not to be met. So while I have reservations, while I certainly have concerns, and while I certainly would have liked the applicant to do better there, I think it's too important an area. And were this a conditional zoning, we might have either gotten some things better or I might be voting differently. But given that this is an existing project, given that this is a quasi-judicial proceeding, I think this highlights some of the flaws in the special use permit process. I feel compelled, although not joyously, but I feel compelled to support the project.
Mr. Pointsy?
This process is markedly different from our regular conditional zoning processes. The special use permit process, which we have been trying to get away from, requires that we evaluate a proposed project against the four specific findings. And the evidence that we can use is limited only to what we receive from our staff, the applicant, and from witnesses who have been sworn in with either expert testimony or testimony rooted in firsthand experience. In many ways, this particular development review process is quite limiting. And it's not a process that we can dictate to a property owner. That said, going back to the 4 findings that we have to go through to determine whether to grant a modification of the special use permit, one particular finding jumped out at me, which is the 3rd finding, that the location of the modification is located, designed, and proposed to be operated so as to maintain or enhance the value of contiguous property. And the only contiguous property we have here is that of Binkley Baptist Church. It was surprising to hear a few weeks ago that they had not been reached out to, but I do appreciate the earnest efforts of staff since then to engage with the church and to come up with a solution amenable to Binkley Baptist that will not hurt the value of the property. And then, of course, the appraisal, which we have to factor in as part of the finding, also indicates that land value is not negatively impacted. Unfortunately, because it's not a brand new project we're dealing with, and we're dealing with a special use permit that was approved several decades ago, it's not required by law to meet the current LUMO standards for stormwater. We have been told, though, that the project does not get from 78 to 70% reduction, which I know is what we all want. It does get closer to that. And surface parking would be reduced under the special use permit. This means it will significantly reduce impervious surface and improve the runoff situation with no increase in flood elevation, according to the information provided by staff. That lends itself to serving our important priorities of public health and safety. The mixed use component of this proposal, I think, is also consistent with the FLUM, which designates this particular area as a place where we want to see residential and commercial. And so with that, the evidence from what we've been presented with tonight and in our prior public hearings support the 4 findings. And again, this is a limiting process. If it was a conditional zoning where I had my full and complete discretion, I'd probably be thinking very differently about this. But that said, there it is. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen or Ms. Stegman?
Are you talking, Ty?
Liza had nothing to add.
Okay. I don't really have anything to add. I think Mr. Parker and Mr. Voinsey have outlined our situation pretty accurately. I also spent my childhood at that mall. I have all sorts of memories, but you know, I think there are a lot of positives about this plan that have been mentioned: the reduction in impervious surface, the farmers market agreement, the affordable rentals, the greenway. You know, there's a lot of good. There's you know, things that aren't where I would like them to be as well. But I agree that given the structure of this current negotiation and the SUP rules we have to work within, I think we are where we are. Yeah.
Okay, I'll finish with my comments and then we'll see where we are. I would agree with the comments from Mr. Parker and Mr. Voinsey. This is an unusual, different process. If we had the conditional zoning process, I think we could have had better conversations with the applicant and the public and really worked out together. But again, this is a modification request. I will say I appreciate all the energy and time that the staff has been willing to give to council on this as well. I've spent many conversations with our attorney and with our staff trying to figure out where we can push, what we're allowed to do, where we have to meet, and what that looks like. I will say this mall needs to be redeveloped. It is not going to be successful. It will continue to go more dormant. I don't know any other word to describe it than where it is now because of the nature of the way that we're, people are really enjoying the outdoor eating spaces and the opportunities of spaces over there that are currently there, but we need more of those. I do see this as an opportunity to get even more commercial, which we've been striving for in our community, to have more commercial opportunities. The fact that we're getting incubator space for different groups that need better support, that they can have these trial spaces and work it out, that we're getting reducing, as you heard, reducing what's there already impervious surface wise. The flooding that's there is interesting. I've been going to this mall for years too, and I know where the flooding occurs, and to be able to reduce that situation so that we're not having it pooled on Willow Drive and that top part of Estes. And it's just going to be better in the parking lot and everywhere else. I want more trees, but the connectivity piece is important too. This having more bike lanes and walkability. It's going to encourage more people to get out of their cars and come here. So I see that as a win. But I will tell you, it really gives me heartburn about the stacking on Willow and the concerns there with what traffic will look like and the massing of that building. That's just not in, it gives me heartburn. But again, because of this process, it's interesting. I don't want us to walk away from not developing anything here, and I don't know how much more we can meet where we are. So I bring it back to council with what you would like to do here. A first step would be to close the evidentiary hearing if you're ready to do so. I will remind folks that this is an SUP modification. It requires, in order to pass any of this, only requires a 5-person vote. So majority vote, sorry, I should say it that well, just to remind folks of where we are. And anyone else has any other questions from our attorney, please speak up now.
Can we, I believe our staff was still doing some last minute work on, and so I think we need to look at that before we close the evidentiary hearing,
That'd
correct?
be great. Sorry, thank you for reminding me.
We have a couple of steps that I have, I don't know if the applicant is agreement. I'll share them with you and we can discuss them. So we've added a couple at the end here, trying to address the Willow Drive concern that we'll conduct a follow-up study following the completion of phase 1 to confirm that the intersection is performing. If it's not acceptable, the developer will be required to implement appropriate measures that are practical and subject to the approval of town manager and DOT. And then trying to address the tree canopy coverage that prior to our zoning inspection final, a minimum of 30% tree canopy coverage would be provided, and that minimum of 20% of that wording is not right. I realize as I'm reading this, 20% of that shall be provided with vegetation on site, and the remaining gap could be provided with a tree mitigation payment in lieu.
Thank you for working on that. Ms. Ryan, a question?
Yeah, Judy, for the traffic. My audio. Hold on.
Yeah, you're reverberating though, not sure. Now we all are.
Okay. So are queue lengths covered in the traffic study as well? You just have level of service. Oh, Judy, you're muted.
I believe so. Kumar, that was his language, and I'm believing that obviously he would be concerned about those queues. So we can make that a little bit broader. Acceptable level of service and appropriate or acceptable queue lengths or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know what the standard is, but that would be great. Thank you.
Mr. Parker?
In regard to the same stipulation, it says with subject to approval by the town manager and NCDOT. Given the conversation we just had, should we in some way include, I don't know exactly how to do it, include the church in that conversation?
Judy, if I had to mute you, you're the one causing the reverberation, so you have to unmute yourself and talk. Sorry.
Sorry, I was like, that's fine. Yes. We can certainly add in there a consultation with the Binkley Baptist. I mean, I think that would be fine.
Thank you.
Ms. Gu?
Yeah, well, can we have this stipulation with regard to the impervious surface so that it has at least had the goal to meet that 70% goal, that even, or in the case if they're not able to implement that over here, then they will be contributing to some payment in lieu to improve the stormwater facility or some other structures to improve the stormwater situation.
I'm not sure if there's council support for that, Ms. Gu. We can check and see. We also heard from our own attorney on the council that requiring them to meet current LUMA wasn't a requirement on a redevelopment parcel. So not sure how to answer that. We can find out as we move through with amendments, but first we need to see if the applicant is good with these two, I guess, stipulations that were revised, or how many were there, Judy? Yeah. Ms. Brown, can you?
Yes, ma'am. I sent an email. Let's hold on for a second. I sent an email back to Judy with a tweak to one of them. Judy, did you see that?
Yes, I just added that in, and I'm going to share it again so you can see that language. Are you? It's not.
We see it, but where did you tweak it?
Oh, we added this last year.
The stipulation, the stipulation on tree canopy coverage with that addition is fine, and that addition is consistent with the desire that you had for us to try to see if we could maybe put some trees at Binkley and that sort of thing. So that one we are good. The follow-up study is not a condition that we are comfortable with because we don't have the ability to obtain right-of-way as a private party. And so if we were to, I'm not sure what we can accomplish by doing that follow-up study in that circumstance. If there's not right-of-way to add a lane, there's just simply not right-of-way to add a lane. And we can't, as a private developer, obtain property from others to do that. So that's my concern.
Ms. Anderson, did you want to share something?
Well, on the mayor, just on the town's behalf, I share a concern on our side that we're going to have a condition in there that requires an applicant to do something that may end up being impossible, legally impossible, because they don't actually have the ability. So I share that same concern on the flip side of the issue. I think it could pose, years down the line, it could pose a potential problem for our staff as well.
Could our staff tell us if there's any other way to meet the intent here? We're trying to figure out what happens if we don't want to approve something that causes a major traffic concern that then the town has to figure out how to deal with and pay for. We're hopeful that the light timing changes that Kumar is recommending are going to work, but if they don't, where are we? Ms. Johnson?
I think Kumar is speaking, but he's muted, so sorry.
What I'm saying is the stipulation includes a word called practicable. We can change that to practicable and or constructible. If the right of way does not exist or it's not going to given by the church, I think we can work with the applicant and DOT for other things that other than what I mentioned earlier.
Is that acceptable to the applicant?
Uh, We remain quite concerned about adding this in this way. So we've got a couple of issues here. One is the issue we've been discussing about how to build it. The other issue there is that traffic impacts on Willow may not just be from University Place. And so the other problem, and Ms. Anderson can speak to this as well as I can, but we can't ask this applicant to resolve a problem except to the extent it is of this applicant's making. And I'm really concerned about, I mean, the level of service. We began this conversation by talking about what the level of service is now, and there's a great deal of traffic on Willow that's unrelated to University Place. And so I'm concerned about it from that perspective as well. I'm as Chair Ms. Anderson's concerned that we'll get down the line and have a situation that is not of our making, and it's not clear what we're supposed to do to correct it.
Ms. Ryan, you have something?
Yeah, I think we need some sort of something here, because what we've done right now is that we have a state where we got a traffic impact analysis that told us that we had to make these changes and mitigations because as part of the way we were going to keep traffic acceptable and safe and moving in this area. And now for other reasons, we've decided that we're not going to implement those out of respect for the church and for their land, which I appreciate. But that means that there still is the potential here for having really serious traffic impacts. And I know I appreciate Kumar's comments and trust him as our traffic engineer, but I think we also have a due diligence requirement for the town to say, listen, if we get to a point after phase 1 and we have serious traffic issues here, I think that means that we need to have some way of saying we have to bring all the parties together to resolve them. I can understand, I think certainly I at least would like to have the study in there as a bare minimum, just so we know what's happening. I think that I would be okay with language that is unenforceable or that you commit to. I would be happy to leave that language out, but I think there's a middle ground that we can find here that says, listen, we need to, until these issues are resolved. I don't know that whether you agree to not proceeding with phase 2, that would be one thing, or proceeding to phase 3 until those issues are resolved. But I think this is it's just providing carte blanche to say, we're going to throw the dice on this traffic situation and it may not work. And if it doesn't, there's nothing we're going to do about it, and which I really don't agree with. So I certainly would like the town to be monitoring it at the very barest minimum.
And just to muddy the waters, NCDOT has a project plan to potentially change that intersection anyway, just in case things weren't muddy enough. Because as we know, NCDOT wants to make major changes along Fordham, so much of this conversation may turn out to be moot.
Well, hopefully not, because we don't like those changes. Yeah. We will,
No, I mean, we could start. Oops, I'm sorry, raising my hand.
Thank you for raising your hand. We've got to find a way to make this work for both sides, and so we're looking for input.
Right. So if you leave the first sentence in there, which is the town conducting a follow-up study, would you have any objection to that remaining?
Well, who would pay for the follow-up study?
It says the town conducts, so I would assume we are good.
I don't think we have an objection to the town determining it's going to conduct a study at that intersection or anywhere else. That's fine.
Okay, so we can put that part in there, and then if the level of service is not acceptable, the parties shall work together to find a practical alternative. I don't know that that commits, it's not the developer shall provide the, yeah, it's not obligating you to do anything, but it's saying we're going to come back to the table with the parties to try to figure out what's going on here.
I hate drafting on the fly, but bear with me. So instead of saying the parties in this permit, I think we probably should identify. So so it would be the town, the applicant, the town, the Baptist church.
I don't know if DOT would be.
A DOT.
It's their intersection. So shall work together to
evaluate.
Sure.
How about to formulate a plan for achieving an acceptable level of service?
Thank you, Lynn. I mean, it certainly is in the applicant's interest as well to have a Willow Drive that's functioning. Because it's your one of your driveways that's going to be plugged up if things don't go well.
Let me read it again, but I think we may be onto something here. I think we may have it. Let me look at it again. That the town conduct a follow-up study at the intersection of Willow Drive and Fordham Boulevard after completion of phase 1 to confirm the intersections performing acceptable level of service and acceptable queue links. If the level of service is not acceptable, the developer, town, Binkley Baptist Church, and NC Department of Transportation should work together to formulate a plan to achieve. We need to change achieve to achieving.
To achieve.
Mm-hmm.
We're being asked to add Willow Terrace Homeowners Association.
Yeah, I saw that come through as well, and I was thinking something similar to that, which is
The only change again at the very end, I would put level of service and queue length, just because I think that may be the bigger issue going forward.
I'm wondering if we should say Willow Terrace Homeowner Association, and there may be other contributing properties along Willow. We don't know who's going to propose what between now and whenever this is either. So,
and other
your word parties was actually good. I just problem was the that, but I think you can say other
appropriate parties.
Other appropriate
Our
parties.
attorney has her hand raised, and
she's probably wanting to shoot me. Let's see.
No, I don't want to shoot anybody. I just would remind everyone that we can't, excuse me, we can't bind other people to this agreement. So this sentence suggests that Binkley Baptist and Willow Terrace will participate in this process, but they would have to separately agree to that. No, it may be no harm, no foul. Just wanted to point out that formality.
I think that's a point well taken. So maybe we can say the developer and the town will seek to work with, and then list out everybody else.
Yeah, you could say adjacent and nearby property owners. I don't know.
Instead of other appropriate parties and other appropriate adjacent and nearby property owners to formulate a plan.
Maybe contiguous and adjacent. Sorry, just to get it right. Contiguous and adjacent, because nearby is broad. And then I'll stop talking.
Well, you don't need, this is very helpful. I think we would take out should work together there because of what we've done instead. Yeah, just delete that part. And so let's see. If the level of service is not acceptable, the developer in the town will seek to work with Binkley Baptist Church, Willow Terrace Homeowner Association, and contiguous and adjacent property owners
it may not be property owners, like in the case of the homeowners association, they don't actually own the property.
Right, we've named them out separately.
I'm saying there may be others in that area
Okay,
that have.
we can go with properties, that's fine.
Okay,
I think that's looking, think that's looking like a plan.
all right. Let's go back to full screen then, if we've all finished reading that.
In that case, I am prepared to move the resolution. I am prepared to move that we close the evidentiary hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Parker and second by Ms. Stegman to close the evidentiary hearing. Any comments that haven't been shared? All right, roll call vote. Mr. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Boyncy,
Aye.
Ms. Gu,
Nay.
Mr. Nguyen,
Aye.
Ms. Ryan. Didn't hear you.
Aye.
Okay, Ms. Stegman,
Aye.
the mayor says aye as well. Vote passes 6-1. All right.
I move, I believe it's resolution, not sure what number it is, but I move the resolution with all amendments and new stipulations.
Is there a second?
Second.
The move by Mr. Parker, second by Mr. Nguyen. Ms. Gu, did you want to try a friendly amendment or what would you like to do? You're muted.
I would like to try a friendly amendment.
To bring the impervious surface, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like well, at least the developer has intent to bring the impervious surface to 80% goal, or make payment in lieu to support the stormwater facilities in town.
So a friendly amendment would have to be accepted by the motion and the second, or you can try to get a second for your amendment. Is this a friendly amendment?
Yeah, I can't support that amendment. It lacks specificity.
Okay. Is there a second to this amendment then? All right, amendment fails, Ms. Gu, I'm sorry. So we'll go back to the original motion to accept the revised resolution with all the stipulations. Are there any comments that haven't been shared? Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Boyncy,
Aye.
Ms. Gu,
Nay.
Mr. Nguyen,
Aye.
Ms. Ryan,
No.
Ms. Stegman,
Aye.
and the mayor is going to say aye. Motion passes 5-2. Thank you all for this evening and for the extra meetings and for working with us. We're counting on our staff to follow through with all the work that will need to be done on these projects that have been approved this evening. We know there's much more to work on and figure this out. And again, thank you for everyone who's participated and given us input and made this a better outcome. So we do appreciate that. We do not have any more meetings on the agenda for you until late August. So I know, woo. I see some smiles out there. So I appreciate all the work that staff has been doing to really get us to this point, and the public following along with us and helping us craft better outcomes, and council work, of course, and the applicant. We're grateful that there's working dialogue between everyone. So with that being said, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.
Good night, everyone.
Happy summer.
Happy
Thank you.
summer.
Good night.
Staff, go take a break.